p.m., this meeting of the Mountain View Wisdom School Board is called to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To roll call. Laura Blakely.
Bill Lambert.
Devin Conley.
Laura Berman. Let the record reflect that all trustees are present today. And we're moving on to approval of the agenda. Are there any trustee questions or comments regarding the agenda itself?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you. Let me just check to see if we have any public comments. We have a motion. Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second? There are no public comments. Second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
A motion made by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Blakely. The agenda has been approved unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to item 2, special recognition. Dr. Rudolph.
All right. So at the first meeting of every month, we do a quick employee recognition. I think we've decided that since the list keeps growing, we won't spend time reading the names, so we do have them in there. But I just want to remind everybody that our success on behalf of our students is magnified when we work together. And so the Turtle Award is designed to recognize an admirable, admirable employee who demonstrates exceptional collaboration and teamwork with their colleagues and or students at MVWSD. For example, Turtle Awards may go above and beyond when they promote and support respectful relationships among colleagues, actively participate in collaborative problem solving and work together to overcome obstacles, work positively and productively with other team members towards the shared goal, and consistently offer support, assistance, encouragement to other coworkers. So there were 52 that were listed, and then there were 5 that were not listed. So I just want to say congratulations to all of those.
Thank you so much, Superintendent. Are there any trustee questions or comments about the employee recognition for the Turtle Awards?
I'll just say it was very kind for the trustees to be recognized this time.
I agree. Thank you.
I'll say yay.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3, the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine, will be approved in one motion. Are there any questions or comments from trustees around the consent agenda? Okay, I'll move on to public comments. If you're a member of the public and would like to comment on the consent agenda, you may raise your hand in Zoom. Seeing as there are no public comments, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And a motion made by trustee Lambert and seconded by trustee Blakely. The consent agenda has been approved unanimously. We'll move on to item 4, communications. We'll begin with employee organizations. Are there any representatives of employee organizations who would like to address the board at this time? You may raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing as there are none, we'll move on to district committees. Are there any representatives of district committees that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing as there are none, we'll move on to our superintendent.
All right. So just want to give just a couple quick things. I just remind everybody that tomorrow we have a community check-in. It's also a half day, so our students will, it's the end of the trimester, so our students will be getting out a little bit early. I know between now and the next meeting, we actually will have Veterans Day, so I just want to thank all of our veterans for their service, as well as for those who have served. or are serving currently. And then just one more reminder, and we'll talk about this again at the next meeting. Just a reminder that parent-teacher conferences are coming up. So this is a great time. Information is coming out tomorrow about how to schedule them. They'll be either in person or also you can do them online. This is a great opportunity for parents to touch base with the teachers to sort of find out what's taking place. And those are all my updates for this week.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. We're going to move on to item 5, which is community comments. This is a time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda today. The board and the administration welcome this time to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agendized items. If you are a member of the public and wish to make a community comment, you may raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing as we don't have any community comments tonight, we will move on to item 6, which is review and action. Item A, resolution in support of recognizing United Against Hate Week. And I believe we have Director Pullman presenting to us today. There she is.
Good trustees. Background resolution was originally crafted last year and updated it with a few details and dates. And I present this to you for a reading so you can commemorate United Against Hate Week, which is going to be November 13th through 17th.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I want to make sure we pull it up so we can go through and maybe take turns reading each line. So trustees, if you can pull that resolution. In the meantime, trustees, do you have any clarifying questions around this resolution? No? Okay. I want to go into public comments and then we'll go ahead and do a read of the resolution. If you're a member of the comment of the public and would like to comment on our resolution recognizing United Against Hate Week, you may raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Okay, seeing as there are no comments. Okay, so how about we start with Trustee Blakely?
Would you like us to move to accept the
Yeah, let's do that. We'll look.
item as presented?
Is
So
there,
I move that we accept the United Against Hate resolution as presented.
okay, do I,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, let the record reflect that Trustee Blakely made a motion. It was seconded by Trustee Lambert, and this resolution has been approved unanimously. So we're going to go ahead and I'll start with Trustee Blakely. Do you mind starting us off?
Happy to do that. Thank you. Whereas members of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Education are honored to join communities across the state and recognize the week of November 13th through 18th as United Against Hate Week. And
whereas Mountain View Wisman School District stands for diversity, inclusivity, and respect for all, irrespective of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and any characteristic.
Whereas we reject hate, discrimination, and violence, aiming for a prejudice-free community.
Whereas we collectively promote acceptance, respect and tolerance and unity, enabling residents to live, work, and thrive without fear.
whereas united, we strengthen and celebrate our city's rich tapestry of cultures and perspectives. And
Whereas the United Against Hate Week and Better Together campaigns embody our collective commitment to foster an environment where every community member can live, work, and flourish without fear of hatred. And
Whereas by joining with our fellow California cities and districts, we send a resounding message that we are united in our resolve to combat hate and promote acceptance. And
Therefore, be it resolved that during this week, we affirm our commitment to the following principles. 1, we denounce hate, discrimination, and violence in all forms. 2, we pledge to stand up against hate and support victims of hate incidents. 3, we encourage open dialogue and respectful conversations to bridge divides and promote understanding. 4, we celebrate the richness of our diverse community and the strength it brings to our city. 5, we commit to working together in partnership with other California cities to create a safe and welcoming environment for all.
Therefore, be it further resolved that during this week, our district will engage all students in activities and programming that operationalize these commitments.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Mountain View Westman School District Board of Trustees adopts resolution number 0211-0223 to encourage recognition of the United Against Hate Week in the schools of the district, November 13 to 17, 2023, with culturally responsive activities that promote inclusivity and belonging and denouncing hate in all the forms.
Wonderful. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, Director Pullman. We are going to move on to a second resolution and
President
support.
Berman, just
Yes,
comments?
yes, please. Oh, I apologize. Yes, comments?
Yes. I just wanted to kind of I think the timing of this is really needed in our community right now. I know that there's many in our community who are being directly impacted by events overseas, and I think this is good. And it also reminds me of since there's so much direct trauma happening, whether it be in our Israeli American or Jewish American community and our Muslim students as well in this community, that many people have reached out to us in the board and the school district to ask if they're safe and okay. And I thought to myself that when people are experiencing trauma, even when we tell them they're okay, they may ask again. And there's nothing wrong and absolutely everything right for us to just continue to be patient and reaffirm that we're doing our best to keep people safe here. And when somebody is in a traumatic experience, they may need to hear that many times. So this moment, and I know we talked about it, thank you, President Berman, for your speech a few weeks back regarding this. And there are people in our community who may need to hear it again and again, just to be reassured, and that's fine. And that's also, I was thinking of one of my favorite books, Minor Feelings, by Kathy Park. She wrote this thing about saying that trauma is not a competitive experience. It's not a competitive sport. So we have a lot of different people who are experiencing trauma. All country, I mean, Cornell University closed classes this week because of what's going on there. So just appreciate this, and I think we should continue to be patient and plentiful in expressing to people that we're going to do our best to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your words, Trustee Chang. I am in full support of what you've said. Thank you. Any other comments from trustees? Okay, thank you so much. Really proud that we passed this resolution again this year and we're able to had a chance to read it. We'll move on to the next resolution in support of recognizing National Native American Heritage Month. Again, with Director Pullman.
Good evening, trustees. Hopefully I solved the technical glitches that were happening. So it's nice to see you this evening. I present to you this resolution to introduce Native American Heritage Month, which is the month of November. And this is, I believe the first time that we'll be recognizing this as a district, and we can continue to bring it back each year.
Thank you so much. Trustees, any clarifying questions? Yes.
Question. Are there places in our district that, whether it be in physical form or in kind of text, we do land acknowledgements?
Yes, it's by the school site. There's lots of different venues. I've seen them done at school assemblies. I've also seen them done at parent organization meetings. So they definitely are important. I've actually been asked for the language itself. So our community is very vested in doing land acknowledgements at different in different arenas.
Okay. And move on to, let's see if we have any comments from the public. If you're a member of the public and would like to comment on this resolution, you may raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, seeing as there are none, do I have a motion?
I move that we pass the resolution as presented.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. On a motion made by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Lambert, this resolution passes unanimously. Trustees, should we take a moment to read this resolution as well? Okay. If you had a chance to pull it up, we'll begin with trustee Blakely.
Whereas members of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Education are honored to join communities across the country and recognize yesterday, November 1st, 2023, as the start of National Native American Heritage Month. And
Whereas National Native American Heritage Month is an opportunity to consider and recognize the contributions of Native Americans to the history of the United States as descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of this land. And
And whereas Native Americans have lived stories of tragedy, triumph, and perseverance that need to be shared with future generations in order to preserve indigenous languages which have contributed to the English language. And
Whereas Native Americans have made distinct and important contributions to the United States and the rest of the world in many fields, including the fields of agriculture, environmental stewardship, wayfinding, medicine, music, dance, language, and art. And
whereas contemporary applications of traditional knowledge systems of Native Americans have expanded scientific, environmental, and intercultural understanding. And
whereas it is important to understand the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land at Mountain View, to seek to understand our place within that history, acknowledging that colonialism is a current ongoing process with which we need to build mindfulness of our participation.
therefore be it resolved that the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees adopts resolution number 01-110223 to encourage the celebration of National Native American Heritage Month in the schools of the district with culturally responsive activities and to value the roles and contributions of Native American people to the local and national economies, culture, and identity.
thank you very much for the reading today, trustees. Thank you, Director Pullman. We will move on to, yes, I apologize, additional comments. Thank you.
I think it's said in the resolution, but I just want to take a moment. It's been a while since I think we as a board just took a moment to do the land acknowledgement of, and our districts and schools are located in the Ohlone community, particularly the Molokawan, Waswas Native American tribes, and those tribes actually at this moment are still seeking federal recognition. So I know there's some kids and perhaps even our school districts and schools around us who have been writing letters to our federal representatives to seek federal formal status because our local Native American tribes around here are not actually designated as an official tribe. So it's something that we can all kind of lend our support to. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Any other trustee comments? Okay, then we will move on to item C, reopeners for negotiations between the Mountain View Wisman School District and the Mountain View Educators Association. We have Miss Bigyord here today.
Thank you very much and good evening. Our current agreement with MVEA will expire on June 30th of 2024. So in accordance with board policy and government code, the district and our MVEA president actually are here this evening to present proposals for our successor contract negotiations. Our core principles for negotiations, of course, are focusing on students' fiscal responsibility, attracting, retaining, and developing exemplary employees, engaging our community, and cultivating respect through clear communication. The district is interested in a multi-year contract and has an interest in clarifying and streamlining the following articles. Article 3, hours. Article 5, compensation and benefits. Article 8, professional growth and development. Article 10, evaluation, and Article 12, leaves. And the district really values our positive relationship with our association, and we really look forward to a collaborative negotiation process this year. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. Newman, our MVEA president, to share his proposals for this year too.
Thank you, Tara. I'd like to echo Tara's words and saying that we are looking forward to another healthy round of negotiations this year. We have a great working relationship, I think, with the district, and it's going to be a great negotiations year, and we're looking forward to a lot of work, a lot to get done. MVEA, Mountain View Educators Association, would like to propose negotiating Article 3, hours, Article 4, assignments, reassignments, transfers, and filling of vacancies, Article 5, compensation and benefits, Article 7, class size, Article 10, evaluation process, and Article 12, leaves. And that's all we got.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Thank you, Ms. Victory. Trustees, any clarifying questions? No? Okay, then I will move on to public comments. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment on this item, you may raise your hand on Zoom. Or if you're joining us in person, you may fill out a speaker card and bring it to the front, please. Seeing as there are none, trustees, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the district's initial proposals for successor contract negotiations between the Mountain View Wisconsin School District and the Mountain View Educators Association as presented.
I second.
Thank you. I have a first and a second. I want to make sure, trustees, were there any comments that I might have missed? Okay, good. Just double checking. So I have a motion by trustee Blakely, a second by trustee Lambert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record reflect that this item, the Mountain View, the reopeners for negotiations between the Mountain View Wisconsin School District and the Mountain View Educators Association has been approved unanimously by the board. Thank you so much. And we'll move on to item D, which is the reopeners for negotiations between the Mountain View Wisconsin School District and the Classified School Employees Associations, Chapter 812.
Thank you very much. Like our last item, our current contract agreement with our classified school employees group will expire on June 30th of this year. And so again, in accordance with board policy and government code, Veronica Del Rio, who is the president of CSEA, and I would like to present our proposals for our successor contract negotiations. Our core principles for negotiating are really identical to those that we just read with MVEA and mirror those that we've just presented. And so this evening, I'd like to share the district is interested in a multi-year agreement with CSEA as well, and has an interest in exploring and amending and clarifying the following articles. Article 9, transfers and promotions. Article 14, compensation and benefits. And Article 19, professional growth. The district does value our relationship with CSEA, and we really do look forward again to very positive negotiations together. I believe that Veronica is here, but I know that she was having some technical difficulties. So there she is. All right, perfect. So I'll invite Veronica then to please share CSEA's proposals as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Del Rio, and I am the CSEA president. And we are also in agreement with with MVWSD as far as keeping a very cordial negotiations and the collaboration that we have done this past years. So I will move into what we have here, and it's let's see. I think let me make sure. Oh. I think I brought up the wrong one. Hold on one moment. I'm so sorry. I thought I had the right one. So sorry. Hold on.
It's okay.
Let's see here. Okay, let me go look for. All right, let me see. I think it's here. This one.
Veronica, would it be helpful if I share them with you or share them for you?
Yeah, that's fine too. Sorry, I'm looking at my computer and it's not pulling up for me. I'm so sorry.
Well, that's okay. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and read them and you
Sure.
can confirm that that's what you wanted to propose, okay?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. So CSEA is proposing a multi-year contract as well. And they are proposing Article 5 with hours and work years. They're also proposing Article 12, which is leaves. Article 14, compensation and benefits. Article 11, negotiations and terms. As they're looking to modify the requirement to open negotiations at a certain time. Veronica, was that accurate?
Yes, that was
Thank
accurate.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Trustees, are there any clarifying questions? No? Okay. If you are a member of the public and you'd like to comment on this item, you may raise your hand in Zoom. If you're in person, you may fill out a speaker card and bring it to the front. Seeing as there are none, any final trustee comments? Okay, then we'll take a motion.
I move that the board approve reopeners for negotiations between the Mountain View Westman School District and the Classified School Employees Association, Chapter 812.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let the record reflect on a motion made by trustee Lambert and seconded by trustee Chang. The district's initial proposal for successor contract negotiations between Mountain View Westman School District and the Classified School Employees Association, Chapter 812, has been approved unanimously as presented. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Del Rio. Okay, we'll move on to, moving right along to item 7, review and discussion. Our first item today is PKTK and K5 English Language Arts Curriculum Adoption Update.
All right, thank you so much, board, for some time tonight. So Coordinator Ellard and I are presenting on behalf of the committees, which include Chief Academic Officer Bauer, Directors Dagger and Kemper, and a group of awesome teachers and parents.
Thank you, welcome.
All right, so our adoption work is aligned with our strategic plan under goal area 1, effective and consistent instructional practices that meet the needs of all students. So if you look at our data, this is our end of the year iReady needs analysis. We see that phonics still is an area of need for our students leaving kindergarten through 3rd grade, which contributes to the comprehension needs of our students in all grade levels. If we look at our beginning of the year iReady needs analysis, we see that the same trends, phonics and comprehension, are areas of needs for our students. So in summary, as I had said, phonics is a continued area of need. These gaps in foundational skills lead to difficulties with reading comprehension in the upper grades. Language comprehension continues to be an area of development as well. Skilled reading is a product of strong foundational skills as well as background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literary knowledge. So our adoption committee has been diving deep into the science of reading, and some big ideas that emerge from this base of research that inform our work is first the idea of skilled reading as an outcome of language comprehension and word recognition. So in order to build skilled readers, we need to focus on all areas of this reading rope. The areas must be taught systematically. We know that word recognition is not biologically natural, so those have to be taught explicitly and systematically in order to build those connections in the brain. We also know that strands are interconnected and mutually supportive. So meaning that as we teach each of these components of the reading rope, it makes it easier to learn the other components of the rope, and it just becomes this exponential momentum moving forward as you learn these different things. We know that skilled readers become increasingly strategic with how they use their language comprehension and increasingly automatic with their word recognition. So those are the things that we are moving forward with that knowledge base as we look at the curriculum adoption. So we're going to talk about two different types of literacy instruction. This first one is balanced literacy, and balanced literacy addresses reading instruction through a variety of means, including a combination of whole language as well as some structured reading, but there's no prescribed amount for each. Balanced literacy typically lacks systematic, explicit instruction of phonemic awareness and phonics. It includes some phonics, but it's not systematic. It's more as needed. Balanced literacy uses repeated exposure and context clues to support decoding development. So it encourages strategies that are inefficient and sometimes actually harmful for student learning, such as guessing at words. Balanced literacy is not structured or sequenced, and it has been proven to be less effective than structured literacy. So another approach to reading literacy instruction is structured literacy. Sometimes it's commonly referred to as a science of reading. Really, structured literacy is a way of putting into practice the science of reading. Structured literacy requires systematic and explicit teaching of literary components, not only explicit instruction of phonemic awareness and phonics, but also support and instruction in those language comprehension skills so that kids can build a rich bank of knowledge in order to be more skilled readers. Structured literacy follows a sequence of instruction, and it's been proven effective in developing reading and writing skills, inclusive of students with reading difficulties or disabilities. So structured literacy has been found to be necessary for many students and beneficial to all students. So when we talk about shifting to a structured literacy approach, our current ELA curriculum, Benchmark Advanced, is balanced literacy based. And as we've been discussing, this approach has been proven to not be effective for all students. In addition, we're coming to the end of our 8-year adoption cycle anyhow. Research has shown that a systematic and explicit approach, structured literacy, is effective in ensuring all students become skilled readers. So here are some citations for some research. There's lots of other citations we could have put as well.
Okay, good evening, trustees. So in the next few slides, I'm going to go over the development of the Elementary Curriculum Adoption Committee and the process we are following to do our work. So we followed this timeline to develop. We have an amazing committee, so we're really excited about that. We began reaching out to all elementary teachers and families seeking participation through an interest form. We received interest from a variety of grade levels and representation from schools across the district. We reviewed all interested teachers and parents with the idea that first, the committee must be comprised of primarily classroom teachers, and that's based on state requirements. And two, we wanted representatives for each grade level as well as all schools. An additional expectation was that interested applicants must be able to attend all of the meetings in order to join the committee. We finalized our committee list and communicated to members in early September and began our committee work on September 12th. This is the committee makeup. We have a crew of 12 classroom teachers that represent various grade levels and schools across the district. We also have our awesome ELD TOSA and one of our reading intervention teachers on the committee. In addition, we have 2 parents with children in both lower and upper elementary grades. And here are their names. Shout out to the committee. So now we're going to walk through the work the committee has done so far. We broke our work up into these 4 phases: building common knowledge, preparation for pilots, the piloting phase, and then recommendations to the community and the board. And here is a snapshot of the work we've done in the first two phases so far. There's some pre-work that we did that I will explain in a moment, but first going over phase one, we really focused on building common knowledge and understanding of the science of reading, how children learn to read, as well as how those instructional shifts that are necessary in order to be in alignment with the science of reading, as Director Nguyen mentioned previously. And this served as the foundation for our work moving forward. In phase two, we set up our parameters for adoption, which included the adopted curriculum must be built from the science of reading, it must have a Spanish language version, and must be available to teachers and students in both print and digitally. And then together, we also established our curriculum must-haves, which I'll explain more in a bit. With the committee, we rated the list of curriculum first against the MVWSD must-haves, and then against our content and pedagogy expectations, which I'll also go over. Along the way, we included process checks and got feedback on the process to make sure the committee had the opportunity to share their perspectives and input on the work, and we adapted based on their input. So here's that pre-work that the district office team did that I mentioned previously. We looked at all of the available elementary curriculum options through the ranking on Ed reports. We committed to the criteria that the materials must be built from the science of reading and also have alignment to state standards. And we found that the Ed reports rating system fit those commitments well. Ed reports rates curricula through a series of criteria categorized into gateways: alignment to standards and evidence-based practices in literacy, and also knowledge building in its second gateway. And those also include text quality and foundational skills that you see listed there. Curricula that get a green rating in both gateways pass to a third gateway that rates usability. We selected 7 curricula that received a green rating on Ed reports, meaning that they fully met the criteria of each gateway. We then established our MVWSD must-haves, which I mentioned previously, in addition to our parameters that we set. And this was based on what our data says student needs, coupled with input from our teachers about what is necessary for student learning in the classroom. The committee then looked at the established rubrics that were already in existence from a variety of places. For example, the Reading League's curriculum evaluation tool, and other rubrics specifically designed for areas in our must-haves like equity and representation or for multilingual learners. And from those rubrics, they pulled items to create a rubric and used it to rate the 7 curricula against the MVWSD must-haves. And from this process, the committee selected 3 to move on. And in our final iteration of this phase, we followed a similar process. We established our content and pedagogy areas, which you see listed here. And the committee then curated a rubric specific to these areas. And we used the established rubric from the Institute of Education Science as a starting point for these areas. The committee moved 2 curricula forward after this rating. And this slide gives you a snapshot of the overall list and how each curriculum progressed or did not progress through our rating iterations. And you see our final 2 for pilot: Amplified Core Knowledge, Language Arts, and McGraw-Hill Wonders.
Right, so now we're going to talk about the pre-K TK curriculum adoption update. So we are doing a pre-K TK adoption simultaneous to the ELA elementary adoption. So as we were talking about before with the science of reading, there's that reading rope, and language comprehension is on the top of that rope. That's because language comprehension starts early at birth. And so that is what we're developing with our young learners in our school district. The strands are interconnected. So when kids come in with really strong language comprehension, it makes word recognition development go exponentially faster, right? Research has shown that vocabulary, attention, and general knowledge in 3- and 4-year-olds are predictors of 3rd and 4th grade reading comprehension success. And in turn, 3rd and 4th grade reading comprehension success is a predictor of high school graduation. Phonological awareness, or the ability to hear and manipulate sounds, is necessary for word recognition development. Like we were talking about before, word recognition is not biologically natural. We go from speech to print. And so we want to make sure that's what we really develop in our young learners, the phonological awareness. Early childhood learning occurs in an interconnected and recursive manner, integrating skills across developmental domains. And effective teaching in early childhood occurs through social responsiveness, social interaction, explicit instruction, and purposeful play. So for the PK-TK curriculum adoption process, our team's goal is to adopt an integrated curriculum built from the science of language and learning in early childhood. Integrated meaning that it's going to cover not only language arts, but math, social studies, science, social emotional learning, physical education, all the pieces. We want to make sure that it is appropriate for 3 and 4-year-old students. So we're not looking for junior kindergarten. We are looking for early childhood education that meets the needs of young students. We're looking for a curriculum that follows the continuum of pedagogical strategies for play-based learning that builds a strong foundation for kindergarten. And because there isn't a defined process for pre-K and TK adoptions from the state, we're using an adoption process and timeline that mirrors our K-5 ELA committee. So the 2 pilot curriculum that have been chosen that are appropriate for both pre-K and TK are creative curriculum from Teaching Strategies and 3 Cheers for Pre-K from Savas. And so this is a snapshot of the PK-TK adoption timeline. And so similar started, Director Kemper looked at all the curriculum available for pre-K, TK, and then used research-based ratings to select the 2 curriculum for further review and pilot. We are doing PD, Director Kemper and I are doing PD with the PK and TK teachers about the science of language and learning and the science of reading in early childhood. And then they will get training on the 2 curriculum that they will pilot, and their pilot dates mirror the exact dates of the pilots for the K-5 ELA. And then, so the idea is that by May, we'll have a recommendation for the selected curriculum. So considerations moving forward, teachers and leaders will need training on the science of reading, structured literacy, and the background on instructional shifts as a foundation for teaching new curriculum. The committee, leaders and coaches have started on this training already, and so the next step is to bring it to our teachers. This kind of learning will require us to unlearn how we currently teach literacy using balanced literacy, and also to be open to learning new ideas about literacy instruction. We also need to consider that pre-K, TK curriculum needs to reflect the needs of 3 and 4-year-old students and prepare them for kindergarten, and that there's always pros and cons to any curriculum options, and no one option will make every person happy. So next steps for both PK, TK, and K-5. We're getting ready right now for the pilots for both PK, TK, and K-5. So we're providing curriculum training from the curriculum companies for teachers on the committee to pilot. And so we're in this pilot phase now. The pilots are from January to April. They are 6 weeks each. And so for K through 5, we are piloting in 11 classrooms across the district. And that 6-week time frame is enough for teachers to do 1 full unit or module. In PK-TK, Director Kemper and the team are finalizing which classrooms will pilot the curriculum. And the idea is that both groups will go through the process and be able to bring recommendations to the board in the spring. So before we go to questions, we just want to give a shout out to the curriculum committees. They have done pretty amazing work. They meet after school, after long days of teaching, and they're always engaged. They've also met so far on 2 full day Saturdays, which is, again, giving up a Saturday to do this work, always fully engaged, committed to the work, and really taking the time to look at the materials and find the best fit for our students. So with that, Coordinator Allard and I are here to take any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation tonight. This is pretty exciting to get an update on this. Trustees, any clarifying questions? Yes, Trustee Blakely.
I'm just curious what the pre-K, TK kind of materials would look like. Like when my kid was in preschool, they were just reading stories and stuff like that. And I mean, do they have workbooks? Do they have worksheets? Is it, what is that?
Yeah, so we're really trying to follow the pedagogy that works best for young learners, right? So we know we want to build lots and lots of rich experiences and vocabulary for kids, because that's the knowledge that you take and it helps you learn everything else, right? It's like Velcro, keeps sticking and sticking and sticking. We also know that for young learners, they learn through purposeful play and lots of interactions with adults that can kind of build and develop their language, right? And so the curriculum looks like that. It has some play-based components. It is integrated, so it's a lot of knowledge building and experiences for kids. And then it has a lot of prompts to support adults in how to honor kids' language and then bring them to the next level of language.
So it's not workbooks. It's more for the teachers in terms of how to lead the exercises and okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Chang?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and excited for the ongoing work of the committee. The two finalists in the choices, the Amplify and the McGraw-Hill Wonders, is there like a distinct difference between the two? As in, is one more kind of computer driven in delivery and one more physical book delivery? Or is there any kind of distinct characteristics that distinguish how these two finalists would be experienced in a classroom?
Both curriculum have hard copy components, paper pencil components. They also have digital components to supplement. I would say you can look through the rubrics that we have to kind of see what we scored on. But they both cover all of the components of the science of. They are both built from the science of reading, so they cover the reading rope. Their approaches to knowledge building are a little bit different between the two, and the approaches to foundational skills are slightly different. And so when the committee pilots, they're really going to take a look at how those two approaches work with students and work in the classroom.
I also have one question. Thank you for that response. Would our dual immersion school use the same materials for the English portion of the day? I'm assuming so because I saw the 2 fifth grade teachers on the committee, but I just wonder if there's any differences for our dual immersion school.
No, so they will be using the same curriculum, the English version and the Spanish version of the curriculum. And as Director Ellard was saying, or Coordinator Ellard was saying, that is a requirement that we made sure that the materials were both available in English and Spanish. And one item on the rubric that the team is looking at is how well those two components match up.
Got it. Thank you. Trustee Chang. Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Lambert and then Trustee Chang. I saw your light on.
Thank you for the presentation. Do any of these curriculum involve the parents at all in the process of teaching their kids?
Oh, the parents teaching of kids. So that is actually one of the items on our must-haves is that family home connection. So whether the curriculum has some options to provide family letters or support for families, how will they be engaged in the learning? So that was one of the items the committee's been looking at.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last clarifying questions? Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Are there other tools, like online tools, that have existing kind of a big place in the curriculum that will need to be kind of coordinated with the textbook adoption? An example, things like Lexia and Achieve 3000 and things like that, like these online platforms. Is that part of our literacy approach in the district? And if so, I guess the question is, are there some existing platforms that will need to be kind of wedded with our curriculum adoption on how we teach literacy?
Sure. I think our call at the moment is really diving deep into these curriculum and going through the process to develop, recommend the curriculum first.
At this moment, are there platforms that are kind of heavily used in teaching and how we teach literacy? Online platforms, I sometimes see kids use tools,
I know my daughter uses, our kids use iReady in the classroom. So there are these online platforms that they currently use, and that's separate from just letting you know what my experience is, but I'm sure Dr. Daggar can share a little bit more.
It actually varies by site. So some sites use iReady, some sites may use Lexia. There's Turcoff, for example, uses Lexia to support students for the language lab. iReady is one of the instructional platforms, but there's also other platforms. Just yesterday, I was at a school site and I saw Epic being used by students to read books and respond. So it depends on the site, Trustee Chang.
And discussion and sharing of those, is that also part of kind of this like a systemic approach of how we're going to look at ELA over the next 8 years? You know, of like, in addition to a textbook, are we kind of looking under the hood of the other tools we're using to teach literacy?
Currently, we're focusing with our adoption, we're focusing on the curriculum piece and the components of the curriculum, but we'll definitely take this in advisement and see what we can do further.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to public comments. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment on our curriculum adoption process, you may raise your hand in Zoom. We see one hand up with the last name Liu. We'll just get our timer up in just a moment. I will give you 3 minutes to share your comment with the board. Okay, our timer's up. You can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hello, this is Nyung Liu. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm just super excited that the balls got rolling, and I know how much work that got put into it. And I know the meeting commitment was insane, but you guys, so just want to thank the committee, and I'm excited about the 2 selections that was picked because I've been following the science of reading, and so it's just really happy. I'm just really happy, and I just want to express my gratitude and thank you for that. Another questions I have is there's a lot of students that are, doing RTI works right now, and these changes won't be implemented until 2014. So if we know that benchmark advance doesn't work and it's doing a disservice to these students, I was hoping is there a way that, that the stuff that's being, looked at to implement for the next 8 years, maybe somehow the students that are currently in RTI that are behind, or there's like a big learning gap, if these stuff could trickle out to them so that they get like an earlier adoption. But that's just something that I just, that's on the back of my mind. Just want to bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment and your question. So we're going to move on to some trustee comments. Yes, Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I wanted to echo what the caller said. Thank you so much to the committee, the parents, the staff. I realize this is a huge commitment, but I just want to make a little historical note. Once upon a time, maybe like 2010 or so, I was on the Parent Curriculum Advisory Council that we had at the time. And it was just chaos compared to what you guys are doing. There'd be books all over the corner, like sitting around and like, well, who likes that one? And they hadn't pre-selected for what they were looking for and just been very methodical. And so I just wanted to compliment you for the work you're doing. I love that we just have 2, because those were the 2 that checked all the boxes, and that you're doing a full year, or doing the pilot like a year in advance instead of, starting May 28th. This is just really great. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results of what the recommendations are. Also the Spanish one too, because we've had issues with that in the past. I think it was maybe with math that was a different adoption for Mistral. So I'm really glad we're being consistent across the district. So thank you for the work.
Yes, Vice President Conley.
Thank you. I would also like to thank the committee members. It's a big lift, but talk about an impactful committee to participate in. This is one that is going to really lift up a lot of students across our community. So, I hope our committee members take to heart what a positive impact they're having in this process. And I am thankful that we're doing this. There is a high level of urgency. I think our speaker tonight, our public comment reflected that. When we look at our CAS scores later, this is going to be one of our main levers for improving student outcomes in ELA. It is vital that we choose a good curriculum and that we provide really high quality training for our staff and support for them as they roll it out in the future, because bang for our buck, this is where we're really going to make a big change in our English language arts outcomes for students.
Trustee Ching.
Thank you. Just some sharing this enthusiasm for us adopting this curriculum. The last time we adopted curriculum, you know, it's before all this research has come out. You know, I think any one of us, you know, we see whether it's news reports and podcasts about the science of reading and how some states are legislating to actually ban the curriculum the old curriculum. You know, so like any of these choices, I think is going to be is an improvement. I guess my main feedback would be that because curriculum adoption is almost a decade-long investment, you know, and it's kind of like a one-time large dollar amount thing, right? And there's a lot of industry behind this, right? Like you have McGraw-Hill on one side, you know, like, and the other side, Amplify is, you know, News Corp, the two giant corporations, kind of vying for business of schools. And I recognize when you look in the news, these are such powerful entities vying for school districts. You see plenty of reports of school districts ditching Amplify for Wonder, and some school districts ditching McGraw-Hill for Amplify, and everyone, and because there's such a lobbying going on for these for schools. So I think I'm really grateful that we're going to have teachers like test this out with our kids, because there's certainly if any parents go to the internet, they're going to find something critical about any of these top choices. So in the end, there's so much kind of conflicting information out there. The wisdom of the teachers with our kids in our context and environment is going to be the most important thing to cut through that noise. And also, just I hope that I saw that kind of technology and what ways these curriculum use technology is not in the must-haves. And I would just encourage the committee to ask the question of which one of these curriculum is future ready, because I imagine for all of us 8 years from now, the teaching of all teaching is going to look very different, especially the teaching of literacy, whether it be, you know, AI or other things. In my mind right now, I'm primarily thinking what AI is going to look like 8 years from now. And we don't want to spend millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on a curriculum that 8 years from now is sitting on a bookshelf because something kind of just totally came up. And, you know, because that happens sometimes. Sometimes we have school districts, you know, I remember in New York City plenty of times we adopt a curriculum and what's used in the classroom is not what the district bought. So I think that I trust this committee and trust the wisdom of this committee to have these conversations of which of these tools is going to serve us now and serve us 8 years from now, especially some of these changes going on both in technology and literacy. Thank you.
Okay, just have one final comment. I want to echo the appreciation for the adoption committee, the sense of urgency, you know, given that the data that we've been looking at recently and we'll look at tonight, and also Vice President Conley's emphasis on teacher professional development. I think that's critically important for the successful implementation of any new program. So I'm in full support of supporting our staff with PD. I also appreciate that in this process, you made a list of Mountain View Wisman School District must-haves too, to go along with that rubric, sort of created our own rubric based on the needs of our students and our community. So I appreciate that. I'm so excited about this focus on science of reading and the play-based learning for our PK and TK students. I think that's also critically important for developmentally for them. And I look forward to seeing the results of the pilot. And I just want to thank Ms. Nguyen and Ms. Eller tonight for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item B, CASP data overview.
Good evening, trustees. Give me just a second while I set this up for us. Oh, I'm sorry. I somehow can't present, so give me just 1 second. I'm so sorry. All right, good evening, trustees. Such a pleasure to be here this evening to present the CASP assessment data from the May 2023 assessment administration. All of our work with CASP is aligned with our strategic plan. Goal 1, effective and consistent instructional practices that meet the needs of all of our students. And under that, with objective 1B, which is ensuring targeted instructional opportunities that maximize the learning for our students. So I will start with a very brief overview of CASP, but before I do that, I do want to make a quick note that I'll skip some few slides in the presentation in the interest of our time together today, but they're available for reference on the board agenda. So what is CASP? CASP is basically an umbrella of assessments that each of our students in grades 3 to 8 take each spring for language arts and math. Our 5th and 7th graders also take the physical fitness assessment. And the 5th and 8th graders also take the CAST, which is the California Science Assessment. For the past 2 years, we have had a shorter form assessment, which basically means there's fewer questions in the CASP assessment than we had compared to the pre-pandemic test administrations. When we're looking at the SBAC, which is basically CASP for ELA and math, the assessments are aligned to the grade levels, and they have 2 kind of test types or parts. First is the computer adaptive piece, and the second one is the performance task. The adaptive test is basically what it says. It adapts, right? So it adapts and poses questions based on the student's previous response. The performance task, on the other hand, measures more complex skills of research or analysis. For example, students may get 2 passages to compare, and then the students respond to those questions based on those passages. So basically, it's longer responses or shorter essay type questions. The longer responses and essays are human scored. So hence, the turnaround time for the student score reports is longer, right? And I get these questions from parents all the time. My child took the CASP assessment in May, and I get the results in August. Well, that's because there are hand-scored items in the assessment for both CAT and the performance task that extends the turnaround time for assessment results. So talking of student score reports, what do they include? Our student score reports for CASP include the growth from year to year, and then the overall performance level as well. Families in our district have access to the CASP scores on PowerSchool Parent Portal, and this year we had the scores available starting August 16th. So let's look at our CASP results and some demographic data. I will share the overall demographic data for our district so far. Some slight changes in student demographics, right? Some groups remain fairly constant, such as students with disabilities, while some other groups, such as our socioeconomically disadvantaged student group, show some changes. So the chart displays 5 years worth of demographic data, but it's important to note that in 1819, our socioeconomically disadvantaged students made up 35% of the population. Our Hispanic Latino students made up 40% of the student population. But this trend changed over time, and we see a drop in our SED student group in 21-22, and then a slight increase again in 22-23, which was last year. Our RFEP students, as we look at the student group in 2021, so it went a slight drop from 24% reclassified to 22% last year. But I do want to point out a consideration while reviewing demographic data, specifically for ELs and our RFEP student group, is that it's ever changing. It's fluid, right? Because ELs get reclassified and more ELs come in. So it's a fluid group that we have. This is a 5-year trend for a demographic trend for our schools. We see some declines and some increases in student groups. For example, at BUB, we see a decline in the number of ELs for the last 5 years, from 44 to 20 EL students over the last 5 years. Similarly, at Mistral, we have about 50% of the students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged. But this number is similar to what Mistral had 5 years ago, 75, and now we have 76. At Montaloma, we do see a decline in the number of RFEP students, right? 32 to 15. Looking ahead at our middle schools, we have At Graham, we see an increase in ELs over the 5 years, but in Crittenden, we see a decline in ELs. So let's look at some data for state, county, and district comparison. This is for 5 years. Now, I want to point out it is not an apples to apples comparison because the county data includes results for students in 11th grade. But for our district, we only have 3rd to 8th graders. Overall, we see that students in our district continue to outperform the students across Santa Clara County in English language arts. But there's a few exceptions, and we'll see that in the slides coming up later. We're looking at subgroups over here for county and district. From 2017 to 2019, we see our SED students in the district performed higher than those across the county. But we do see declines for our SED proficiency now as compared to the county. And even though our English learners performed higher than the county previously, there has been some decline in the last 2 years. This is our subgroup for ethnicities, and we see over the years, Asian and white students continue to perform higher. And last year, 2023 was the first year that our Hispanic Latino student group proficiency was same as the county proficiency. And this is for ELA. Looking at math, results similar to that we saw in English language arts. We continue to outperform higher, and we're higher than the county and the state. When we're looking at math subgroups for county and district, we see our English learners are performing below the county by 4 percentage points. And we also see a decline in our socioeconomically disadvantaged students from last year to this year. And they're lower than the county at 23% proficiency. Ethnicity subgroups for county and district for math. We do see our Hispanic Latino students performed higher than the county here for this past year. We're looking at neighboring districts now, and our district in this group, the only district that has similar demographics or somewhat similar demographics is Sunnyvale. To give you an example, in 22-23, Los Altos had about 10% of their students identified as English learners and 6% that qualified for free and reduced lunch. Cupertino had 16% of the students identified as English learners. And Sunnyvale and Mountain View, we have similar percentage of students that qualify for free or reduced lunch. We and our district have a higher percentage of SED students than either of our 3 districts, Los Altos, Palo Alto, and Cupertino. For math, similar to our language arts, we're performing higher at a higher proficiency than Sunnyvale, but we're lower than the other 3 neighboring districts. So looking at some comparisons, like I pointed out earlier, we continue to outperform the county. And in ELA and math, the overall gap, which was closing previously pre-pandemic, it has increased a little bit in 22-23. And now from in 22, we had 21% point gap in ELA and 26% in math between Los Altos and our district. So it has increased a little bit. And we're seeing for both language arts and math students with disabilities, Asian and white are higher than the county, but our ELs and SED are lower. Hispanic Latino, like I pointed out earlier, are higher than the county performance in math, but similar to county in language arts. The next couple of slides, we'll just quickly skim by. It is by school data for language arts and math. We see some increased proficiency at some school sites over the last year, and we see some declines for both content areas. We see math here now. Looking at grade level data, this is English language arts first, and then we'll see math, but grade level data is really fascinating to me. I'll capture some outcomes for us in just a minute, so please hold tight on that one. Here we have math grade level data. So overall, we're seeing slightly lower proficiency in language arts from last year, so 66 to 64. We do see increases for Stevenson and Landolt, but then we have some declines for Thurkoff and Graham. Well, here's the grade level outcome that I wanted to share. We see larger declines for our 3rd, 6th, and 7th graders. Well, when we were looking at our data and doing some analysis, it made us wonder what's going on. So something to think about is last year's sixth graders were in third grade during distance learning in 2020. The third grade is the grade level where we shift instruction from learn to read to learn. So we also know that explicit reading instruction or math instruction is not the same over virtual platforms. Well, then this cohort of third graders from 2020 comes back to school as fourth graders in 21. And as you may remember, we had COVID safety protocols that were a priority when our students returned to school. And that caused some interruptions in steady learning or instruction as well. Then this cohort of students comes back to school in 2022 as fifth graders. And we're still somewhat impacted by chronic absenteeism that I'd shared previously with the board when I presented the iReady data. We did see chronic absenteeism higher rates due to RSV or other flu variants that were still prevalent. So if you look at it and take a step back, this student cohort has had some interrupted learning over the past 3 years. And we know that as students move through third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, the text complexity increases from elementary to middle school. So we have continued work to do for the students report. And we're hoping to see, and we're actually looking forward to seeing growth for student achievement this year with all the work that we're doing with our students. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Similar to language arts, we see Castro held ground for math as compared to last year. We do see Stevenson, Landons, and Crittenden, as well as Thurkoff, have slight increases. Again, the same trend like language arts, third, sixth, and seventh graders show decline in math. Same thing, we have foundational skills in multiplication, fractions that are taught in third and fourth grade. And that was the time when our current sixth and seventh graders experienced interrupted learning. But these are important skills for success in middle school. So we have work to do in these areas with all of our students. What we have now is overall subgroup data for language arts. We see some declines, but we also see that our students with disabilities, that last set of bar that you see, they're still higher than they were 5 years ago. For our reclassified students here, we see increased proficiency at some sites such as Castro, Landold, Stevenson, Margus. And then we see some declines at Imai, Mistral, Thurkoff, and both of our middle schools. When we're looking at English learners across schools for language arts, we see 4 of our schools showed improvement, but we do see larger declines for Montaloma, Thurkoff, and Vargas. When we're looking at our Asian subgroup, in terms of ethnicity, we do see that 4 of our schools increased proficiency for the student group, Bob, Imai, Landals, and Montaloma over last year, but we then see declines at Thurkoff, Vargas, and Crittenden. Here we have Hispanic Latino student group, and we see 3 of our schools increased proficiency from last year. So looking at our language arts outcomes, we see declines for our student groups, except for our English only Asian and white students, where there was no change. And we know that we have larger declines for our at-risk subgroups. But we also have to keep in perspective the ELs and RFEPs are fluid groups. We see double-digit increases for ELs at BUB, but we also see larger declines at Mistral, Montaloma, and Thurkoff for our ELs. Our SED students at Landols saw a 12 percentage point increase, but then we see SED students at BUB, Imai, Thurkoff, and Crittenden we see larger declines there. So all of this data, when we're looking at it and processing it, right, it makes us wonder, was there a change in demographics at this particular site? Did the cohort group, how do we dig deeper? We should dig deeper into the cohort of students and see what was going on. Teacher teams and site leaders at our sites are digging deeper into their site-specific data as a part of our multi-tiered system of support, our universal data cycles, and we're designing targeted action plans for student support. We'll talk a little bit later in our next steps and our work so far about that too. Moving on to math data by subgroups, we see students with disabilities keep pace or are improving slightly over the years. And you may remember a similar trend for ELA. ELs here at Imai and Thurkoff show improved proficiency. So when you look at these higher increases, how can we share information and ideas and practices with each other? So as sites dig deeper into the data and see what's worked, sites that is principals and even instructional coaches both have PLC groups across schools where they share best practices with each other and talk about, so what are you doing? Oh, how is that working? And I've personally experienced those conversations with one of our coaching PLC group. Moving on to ethnicity data, similar to language arts, we're seeing Asian students group in math. We see increases at some schools and then declines at some others. For Hispanic Latino students, we see increases at Imai, at Landolds, Derkoff, and Crittenden. So what are our math outcomes? Slight declines for some student groups, except for our English only and student with disabilities. And then ELs at BUB in math show greater, they show greater increases. Sorry, ELs at BUB show greater increases in ELA. But when we look at math, we see a 6% decrease. So sites are digging deeper into this data and seeing what's going on. Who are these students? What's going on with them? Do we have cross sections of students that are Hispanic Latino or ELs or SED? And this is critical information in identifying student needs and then planning for targeted student support. So what is the data telling us? Well, our data tells us that gaps persist with our at-risk groups, and we have continued work to do with our ELs, our SED students, our Hispanic Latino student groups. We know that to overcome learning gaps, we not only need to focus on small group instruction, we need to even focus on core tier 1 solid instruction. And we need to focus on mathematical foundations, on math fluency. We need to focus on reading foundational skills, which are the building blocks for the future success for our students in upper elementary and moving forward in secondary education. I equate this to buying a house, right? We first look for a solid foundation, and then we look for other things such as double pane windows or a beautiful door. They come in later. But we need the reading foundations and the math foundations for our students. We also need to use student data frequently to monitor academic progress and to plan for student support and to extend learning. And we need to use a variety of data for that. So what work have we done so far based on our student data? We've done a lot of work with our multi-tiered system of support, our universal data cycle, our COST, which is coordination of support team. Our student study teams, we have been focusing on using student data with even more intentionality than we have ever done that through our data cycle process. We use student data to guide instructional actions across grade levels. And at the middle schools, we're doing that with departments. We've provided multiple professional development sessions for our principals, for instructional coaches, and they in turn are training their teacher teams. And we've had multiple sessions, for example, on the August PD Day, in October, and even during staff meeting time. Trustee Conley had previously at the ELA Adoption Committee mentioned the importance of professional development. And we wholeheartedly believe that instructional shifts and change happen when we train our staff at multiple levels to support those changes. Principals are also providing feedback to teams on their data cycle action steps. And after they walk through, they also provide feedback to teachers. Our data cycle 2, which ends in January, by then we'll have our iReady Diagnostic 2 data, and in addition to other formative assessments and classroom assessments that teachers use, and we can see student growth and progress. Our early literacy team just finished their first round of reading interventions at Castro, Mistral, Thurkoff, and Montaloma for K-2 students, and most of the students met their Cycle 1 goals. We've also worked on newcomer support. We have 4 of our elementary schools that have newcomer support teachers because we have a higher number of newcomers at that site, and we have newcomer teachers at each of our middle school as well. We're also providing, in the vein of professional development, we're providing EL trainings, which are offered weekly for teachers. And so far, we've had over 61 teachers that have attended the professional development sessions, and over 7 sessions have been conducted since September. We've also expanded our ELOP program with MVWSD Plus and extended the school day for our at-risk students. We're moving towards adopting the science of reading and instructional shifts. We've talked about that in the past, in the last board meeting and the one before that as well. And we just saw the ELA adoption focused on science of reading, built from the science of reading and the instructional shifts we're doing. We're providing professional development for our site principals at leadership team meetings. For the instructional coaches, this past Friday, we had a science of reading professional development session for our coaching team. Our Ed Services team, our cabinet members go out and visit sites and provide feedback to site leaders on instructional shifts. We have data meetings, one-on-one data meetings that we review data documents with site principals and provide feedback around instructional action plans as well. Well, we do have some considerations in all of this data that we're seeing, which has come at us. Some that has, let me just say, the data has impacted each of us deeply. Well, we have to keep in mind that gaps have widened, and we know that we have to be intentional about our instructional strategies. Our Smarter Balance or CASP assessment provides us the overall scores. Well, we do need to dig deeper into our already diagnostic data, our other formative trimester assessments, such as literally that provide detailed domain level and standard level information that we can use for instructional planning. School teams are also refining their MTSS practices, and we do know that academic gains is not an overnight fix. It will take time to fill the gaps for our student groups. So what are we going to do to address the needs that our student data has highlighted? We're going to refine our MTSS implementation with a focus on core Tier 1 instruction. We're being very intentional about our instructional practices. We have 9-week data cycles, and we're using data frequently and with intentionality during each of these cycles to monitor progress and learning. Sites and teacher teams are really focusing not just on what is being taught, how it is being taught. What is working, what is not working, and what do I need to adjust based on what I'm seeing during the data cycle as well. Teacher teams are developing plans for the whole class, for small group, and for focused students. We're continuing our professional development for science of reading, MTSS, as well as analyzing data with our site principals and coaches. We're going to continue our EL training series that are offered weekly. We're undergoing the shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy. And with our ELA Curriculum Adoption Committee, we're excited for all the work in adopting a curriculum that will ensure positive outcomes for students. Dr. Rudolph and our Ed Services team also reviews data with site principals after Diagnostic 1 and then again after Diagnostic 3 in May. We have our mid-year data meetings coming up with site principals in December. All of our sites use our CASP data and iReady data, as well as LCAP data, so integrated grow data to set goals and develop and revise academic actions as a part of school site plans. For us, our school site plans are not just a compliance document, right? It is a guide for our sites on the work that will be done to support student groups. And staff will bring an update to the after the dashboard is released in December. I would like to wrap my presentation here this evening, but want to point out that this data has impacted each one of us. But I do want to say what Dr. Rudolph reminds us of every time, that we've been here before. But through our intentional and targeted use of student data, we can and will target our instructional actions for student support. We will come back up with improved outcomes for each and every student. We're rolling up our sleeves even more. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
Thank you so much. I see some microphones lining up, so I'll begin with Trustee Lambert.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. In one of your last slides on next steps, you talk about focusing on improving the core tier 1 instruction across the sites, and then one of the next bullet items is improving intentional interventions, tier 2 and tier 3. Could you explain what those tiers mean?
Absolutely. It's a great question, by the way. So it's aligned with our multi-tiered system of support, which has three tiers, right? So tier 1 is for all of our students. For example, in a classroom, every one of our students, we're targeting the way we're teaching them. So we're taking a priority standard, we're breaking it into skilled, and we're focusing on instructional strategies that work with all of our kiddos. Then we're looking at the student data and the assessments, check for understanding, weekly assessments. And we're using that data to see, are students getting what I taught them as a teacher? Maybe some students got it, maybe some didn't get it. Okay, so then what do I need to do? I continue focusing on giving them additional support and practice. Okay, but there are some students that need even more targeted support, maybe through small groups, maybe through some targeted strategies, maybe the student has support that they're requiring as a part of an accommodation. They fall into our tier 2 category. So we'll give them some, in addition to core tier 1, we'll give them tier 2 supports. But then there's still some students that need even an additional layer, and that's about just a few 5% maybe of our students that may need that additional third layer. So they're getting the whole class support. They're also getting targeted interventions through tier 2 strategies, and then they're getting maybe one-on-one help with someone. So we're giving them multiple layers of support.
Just real quick, about how many percentage of students fall into the tier 2 category?
I don't have the exact number. It would depend on the classroom, on the students, the data, maybe. So I don't have the exact number for you right now. We can get that for you.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. A question about the data based on demographics, page 48 and page 60 of the report on Latino data. The 2022, they're like most of school sites, you see this big drop. There's a few school sites where they didn't, or I might look at Landals, like it did for a little bit and they went back up, but some kind of stayed down. And I recognize, there's a lot happening in the world between that time, but is there any anecdotal on why, what is the big drop, and why is it some schools, Latino students didn't experience that big drop the same way other school sites did?
It's $1 million question, and I'll try and answer that a little bit. So it's difficult to pinpoint a particular reason, but I do have to say we go back to looking at the numbers of students. Did that change? Was the Hispanic Latino group, for example, did that number change? It was 2 different cohorts of students. Were there any strategies that the school may have adopted, or the classroom teacher or the grade level teacher, that really worked for that student group? So there's multiple ways that we have to dig into that data to provide a perspective on what worked, what didn't work. I can't say that I know Landals last year and this year, they have been working with providing support for students with reading. And we do know that reading does help in the transfer helps, right? So you're able to understand better. Maybe that is one reason, but it's just difficult to say that's the entire reason that they had reading intervention in place.
Thank you. And last question is, our state testing, how is it correlating with our iReady score? Like, are they, when we cross the demographic data, do they look like they're speaking kind of the same thing, or are there anomalies between the 2 data sets?
So I have not done the correlation this year, but I did it last year. And it was close to 1 when we did the correlation, the coefficient of correlation. Students that did well on iReady last year did well. Most of the students did well on CASP as well in both content areas. I didn't do that correlation specifically this year, Trustee Chang, because that data when we saw last year, is iReady a good predictor? Mostly it is.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you for the presentation. I just had one question, which is a little bit, well, it's certainly related to one of the questions Trustee Chang just asked. I remember Landell's last year was working on the Orton Gillingham, incorporating some of those strategies into their learning. And I know we're talking about other dyslexia strategies. Is that separate from the science of reading, or is it part of it? And it sounds like maybe that's one of the factors that might have shown that might have been responsible for the improvement that they did see at Landell's.
So Orton Gilligan was something, yes, that Landell's has an intervention strategy, and Principal Dolmans can talk a little bit more about that. They're still continuing with that, and it definitely does help. It is one of the strategies. It is actually multi-sensory way, an approach to, it's not a strategy, it's the approach to teaching reading. And we know research has shown that it does support students in understanding to read. Principal Dolmans, if you have something else to add for that increase, feel free to chime in.
So just real quick, I know we talked a lot about OG. I just want to, last year was his first year, but it's also made for earlier readers. It's not made for the older kids. So I think we need to do a little bit more deep diving into what occurred in grades 3, 4, and 5 that helped with the results. I'm not saying that it isn't having an impact at the school site, but it's the target audience is a little bit different than the tested. So one of the things we've all talked about is just going out and seeing what else is transpiring across school sites to understand the results a little bit more.
Thank you. And I'm really glad we're doing all this. I mean, I know you say it's touched everybody deeply, and I know it has, but I'm really glad that we're not just despairing, that we're taking constructive steps to figure it out and do it better.
Vice President Conley.
Thank you, President Berman. Thank you for the presentation tonight. So I had a couple of questions. I am concerned, as I understand staff is as well, and our whole team, to see our English language learners and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students drop below the county averages in both math and ELA. I had high hopes for the rollout of the universal data cycles last year. And then last year was our first year we had ELAP in place, the after school programming for at-risk students, the whole school year, I think. I'm wondering if you can speak about the implementation of the universal data cycles, and then maybe about the participation rates and kind of what's going on in ELAP as well.
I can try and answer the first part, and then I'll have to call on my fellow director, Chang, to talk about ELAP. That's okay, because I don't know much about that.
That's fine. Thank you.
All right. So universal data cycles, we started the rollout last year, right? And we wet our feet quite a bit, and we started intentionality around data. And then as we had 5 data cycles last year. And we got feedback. It seemed like we didn't give enough time between one data cycle and the next for students to show results, to try out strategies and interventions, right? So we got that feedback, and we revised the way we rolled out data cycles. So what we did with revisions was we actually reduced the number of cycles to 4. So we have longer periods of time now that students are engaging in, are getting exposure to strategies and are being tested, and then we're making those adjustments for students, right? So now we have those aligned with 4 cycles and with our professional development days. So teachers have a longer block of time during the PD days where they can actually engage in conversations with data. Another thing we did with revisions and based on our learning and feedback was we changed the questions. And we aligned them to the 4 PLC, Richard Dufour's 4 PLC questions, right? Which are basically talking about, what do we want students to learn? How do we know they will learn that? What will we do if they don't learn it? And what will we do for students who've learned it? So what we're really doing is really being intentional about each of our planning for that data cycle. We're thinking of all aspects, students that are below, that are at and above. Then another thing we added in our data cycle this year was the whole group, the small group, and focus students. So you're really targeting in on what each and every one of the students needs, in addition to the core tier 1, the whole group. Those are some changes that we've made to make it more intentional and to get even better results. It's basically planning with intentionality.
So I guess the other thing I would just add is just when we did our assessment last year, even though we were sort of bringing back data protocols, what we didn't have was a consistency in terms of the interventions, which is one of the things that we worked through with our MTSS process to sort of codify, here are some proven strategies that we can use when we're looking at the data, as opposed to just simply trying, well, let's try this a little bit more. So being a little bit more intentional about which interventions are going to be used was important. And then ELOP actually rolled out over time last year. So this is his first year of full implementation. It took us a while to get it up and going.
Yeah, I thought it started in the 21-22 school year.
This is our first full year.
Okay. What is our participation rate like? There's Director Chang.
So we have, I'll let Director Chang change, but we have 700 students that are in there right now, but he can talk more about the participation.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Yes, Dr. Rudolph is correct that last year was the gradual ramp up year, and this year is actually the first full implementation year. It did take us some time to enroll our first few hundred kids last year, all the way up until winter or early spring. So I think it's a little early to expect that to have had an impact on the scores for last year, or much of an impact.
And then what are the participation rates this year for our at-risk students? Or
Generally, so we invite, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so we invite all unduplicated pupils, so all of our ELs, English learners, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And our participation rate is right now at about 50%. There is a bit of a wait list because of staffing challenges in the current economic situation with hiring. But overall, it's right at where we expected it to be. Unfortunately, we don't have as many staff as we would like, and so we're enrolling as many people as we can, as quickly as we can, given the staffing situation.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions from trustees?
Yeah, sorry, I was almost done. I mean, the only other, when we were looking, that Landals does jump out last year for their ELA scores for the Hispanic and Latino students. If I recall correctly, Landals also had a reading interventionist who was very, very experienced, who was working one-on-one with students. I don't know if that is what led to that outcome. There's a lot that goes on in the classroom as well. But it sounds like there are a lot of different strategies going on there.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to jump in there. Sorry, I couldn't unmute earlier, but yeah, we did have an amazing intervention teacher last year. Her name was Claudia Rivas, and unfortunately, she wasn't able to stay with us. She took a full-time job elsewhere. But to Dr. Rudolph's point, the interventions that we're putting in place are mostly targeted at students who are below grade level in reading. So we used the Orton Gillingham program for students in K through 2nd, and then we used Spire for students in 3 through 5th. This year we are making some changes, and we actually trained a 4th grade teacher in Orton Gillingham. So we are continuing to be very intentional about that, because as Trustee Berman said, the last time we had this conversation, you see the results. If you teach kids how to read, they're not only going to perform in reading, but also in math. And that's kind of what we saw last year. So we're hoping, we have a new intervention teacher. She's also wonderful. And so we're hoping that the continued focus on the science of reading and providing that intervention to all the students who are below grade level or are still learning to read, providing that structured literacy instruction is going to continue to push us in the right direction. Thank you.
We will move on to public comments. We have one comment in person. I just want to see if there's anybody on Zoom who would also like to comment on this item. I don't see any. Oh, I see one hand on Zoom. So I will have Mr. Nelson is here in the boardroom, so I'm going to have him come up. Mr. Nelson, you may come up to the microphone and we'll have 3 minutes. And then after that, I will go to Zoom and we will take our Zoom public comment. Oh, okay. That's fine. So we can go ahead and go to Zoom first. It sounds like our in-person comment needs just a moment. So.
Hello, this is Nyung Liu again. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that thorough presentation. And I just wanted to applaud the Lando's principal for, doing getting teacher training for Gillingham and getting and then using Spire for the higher grade. I think I believe that is the reason for the Lando score to improve. And I'm hoping the other school site get that sort of adoption as well. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment tonight. Do we have any other Zoom comments, Dr. Rudolph? Nope. Okay, so then we will move on to Mr. Nelson is here in person. Mr. Nelson will put up the timer for 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Stephen Nelson. I'm talking about gap and change charts. One of the, at 8th grade graduation, our students have finished their learning here and their journey is going to go to high school the next year pretty quickly. How have we prepared the 3 largest minority groups, Asian, Hispanics, and whites? This is a cardboard version of that chart that I sent you, chart number 1, looking at what the 8th graders are. And it's just on the math, because that's the one where the gap is the biggest. In this case, I've even changed the charting system a little bit. So the width of the bar represents the percent that ethnic group is in our school system. So whites and Asians are slightly smaller than the percent of Hispanics that we have in our school system. And the thing I want you to know is how deep that gap is. One of the things that makes more sense when you have gaps that deep is not just to look at something move 2 or 3%, but what the ratios are. Because the ratio between that 24%, I think it is, of Hispanics and both the whites and the Asians are about the same, is now 1 to 3.6. 5 years ago, the ratio was only 1 to 2.6. So we've gotten substantially worse in the students that we're handing off to the high school in terms of how far behind our Hispanic students are relative to both the whites and the Asians. In fact, that's the 5-year bar is the bar that's in the middle there. And both the whites and Asians only changed 1% or 2 up or down over that 5 years. So yeah, we have a gap problem and it's growing. It's not getting less. And it's not a couple of percent. It's significant. It's disastrous. How many Hispanic astronauts are we going to send from this district? Not very many. How many engineers and scientists and math teachers and computer scientists are we going to send from our Hispanic population? Not very many. You need to get those numbers up. And this is one thing when you have these data splats you can't tell what's going on. I'd also like you to look at the yellow sheets I sent out. That's a charts of what happened with the SED in math in elementary school. What you'll notice is the SEDs that were transported or went to Stevenson, you're seeing steady improvement from 20, 30, 40% deltas versus the district average. Thank you.
We'll move on to comments from the trustees. Trustees, would anyone like to begin? Trustee Ching.
Thank you. It was said by one of the community comments and kind of hinted on our Q&A that while there are some schools that have decreased, there are school sites that are showing that did increase. And I'm referring in particular at Landals. And Landals, their performance went up 3 and 4% between the ELA and math. And so I think that while there's a lot to look at, the things we need to improve, it's worth also looking at where are things looking promising. And I appreciate the comment made by the principal at Landals, and I hope that I encourage the district to really, like, if each school site is kind of like a laboratory, then like we need to see when things are promising, we need to then look at that laboratory and go, okay, what are they doing here that we should then incrementally scale to the school sites? And Ortho Gillingham as a I have dyslexia. My family's very familiar with having paid money to give our child access to that curriculum. And if Landals is seeing promise with that, I hope that's something, along with what other things that they may be doing, is looked at more closely. And I don't mean just to single out Landals, but one thing that's interesting at Landals is we have 2 school sites in our district that mirror our school district demographics. So if we want to look at what would a school look like if it wasn't if it looks like the demographics of our entire community for Mountain View Wistman, that's Vargas and Landals, and both the schools are doing pretty well. We look at even with the challenges of the pandemic. So it speaks to this idea that that school sites that reflect the demographics of the district, there's something in there. And the school sites that disproportionately put one ethnic group or socioeconomically disadvantaged school students disproportionately at one school site do disproportionately worse. So I'd appreciate the work at Landals and all the schools are doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. Trustee Blakely.
I'm really glad we're digging into this, and I liked a lot of what I heard in terms of the strategies that were tweaking, revising, implementing. I love sharing best practices. And I know that the staff is really looking at what is going on at each of the schools. And to the extent it makes sense to import certain things or share, that's great. The one thing that isn't in this data that concerns me, which I think is probably, has a piece of the responsibility, is the long-term absentee rates. And I think a lot of the subgroups that are showing less growth than they had pre-pandemic are the same ones that are having like 20+% of their kids, what are they called? The long-term absent more than however many days. I've been chronically absent. Thank you, Trustee Lambert. I've been digging into the site plans. I'm not quite done, but some of the schools really seem to be focusing on that. And I think that is a big piece of the equation, because we can provide the best learning and teaching strategies possible. And if the kids aren't going to school, they're not going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think we have to just keep that in mind, and how to make the learning more engaging so the kids will want to come to school, and just get really creative in terms of trying to make sure that families are sending their kids to school. And I think it was the AMI site plan said that they have a higher percentage of Asian families, and that many of the families who have family abroad who had not been able to visit their family for 3 or 4 years were going during the school year when they might otherwise go during summer or vacation time. So, I I get that. I mean, family is really important too, but I'm hopeful that we can, that will taper off and that we can try to make sure that our kids are going to school. And thank you to all the educators who are teaching them.
Vice President Conley.
Thank you. You know, we have a lot of things that we started to implement last year in pieces, like trying to roll out MTSS a little bit. And then this year we're really digging in, starting ELAB last year to provide after-school programming for our unduplicated students. And this year, it sounds like there's 700 in there, but it's only about 50% of the total of that population. And then the universal data cycles, it sounds like there's a lot of refinement going on with that. I think I'm concerned, but I also know that so are our teachers and our staff and our principals. I'm really looking to the school site plans to see how schools are going to be addressing what's going on at these individual sites, because there's drops, but it's not entirely consistent how it's rolled out across different locations. You know, and Trustee Chang made a point about the demographics of a school site. Mistral is 50% SED, which is different than our overall district, but it had a drop off, but it's kind of holding its own. It's not that different in performance from Monaloma or Therakoff. And it used to be on par with Vargas. So where that tipping point is might not necessarily be a mirror of district demographics. It might be something else. Or dual immersion may have an impact that we, you know, aren't accounting for here. But I'm looking forward to diving in with some principals about their school site plans. We have a process where the trustees can review school site plans and then sign up to meet with principals to talk to them about what's actually within the plans themselves. And that's going on over the next couple of weeks. And those plans are where this data gets transformed into action at the school site. So I think that that's going to be, again, another really important lever for how we are going to meet the needs of our students. And really, you know, we need to hit it out of the ballpark this year because our students have been through a lot and they need a boost. Thank you.
I just want to say that I've read 7 of the site plans so far. The principals and the site councils have put in a lot of work. These are not just slapped together. So I'm really appreciative of that.
Trustee Chang.
We get these reports of there's so much that the staff are doing, and you know, are here on the dais. We can just support them and kind of make sure we compensate them and things like that. But the one thing that we can do up here that impacts these test scores, it really still goes back to the attendance boundaries, right? Because like our site educators, they do everything they can with the children that show up, right? And the people who decide which students go to which schools and how many students of need are at one school site, we decide that on here, right? So like the one biggest lever that we have control over is the demographics at each school site, right? So the teachers, they can find effective curriculum and they can share strategies. And that's not our duty. We don't have control over that. We can just support them. But here we control the boundaries. And we're, you know, here we have a bunch of educators on here on this dais. We all know that demographics impact test performance. Let alone test performance, it impacts learning, right? So, and we control the demographics of each of these school sites. So, you know, that was said during our iReady report a few months ago. And you know, here we have the state testing. At some point, I look forward to us doing our role on this and helping the demographics be such that help our educators lighten their lift and succeeding with all our kids.
Vice President Conley.
Thank you. You know, I don't disagree that concentrated poverty has an impact on students, but I will say I'm not willing to write off the school as it is right now because many of the students are low income. I formerly taught at a charter school called Rocket Ship Discovery Prep in San Jose, and 85% of our students were low-income Spanish-speaking students, but we had an 800 API for the school back in the days when APIs were a thing. So our students at Castro are quite capable of performing at much higher levels than they are. And we need to make sure we're still holding those high expectations while also trying to address, other ways of looking at demographics that might benefit the students at that school. I don't want to lose sight of maintaining high expectations for performance at that school, or telling people, whatever, it's hopeless, you can't do it, because that doesn't serve our children either.
Yes, Trustee Chang.
I fully agree with Trustee Connolly that if we indeed do have school sites that have a high disproportionate, high concentration of disadvantaged students, as we do in Castro, one solution would be possibly redoing boundaries. Another solution is, like what you said with Rocket Ship, as in the investment of resources, extended day, wraparound services. Like, if we are going to put that much poverty in one place, then we need to do exponentially more in wraparound services and all kinds of things to assist the staff, right? Because otherwise we're asking the staff to do an impossible task. So I feel like, and that also I feel like is in our control, right? Because we control the budget, right? So it's like one or another. Either I just hope we just don't keep doing the same thing. So either we're gonna keep Castro the way it is, and let's really double down the way that Trustee Connolly said, as in her own experience at Rocket Ship and things like that, where charter schools have succeeded in doing with extreme intervention, or we change the demographics.
Well, Trustee Chang, I'll just comment that I think the board has given direction to really focus on Castro and reimagine the school. There's so much opportunity in that community and so much potential, and we have a strong staff. And I think right now what the district is working on is compiling a lot of data, a lot of information. I know Dr. Rudolph had this conversation about what makes a great school with DAC at the most recent meeting. Spoke a little bit about it at the Cafecito too last week, and I know these conversations are ongoing. So we've charged our staff and our superintendent with really reimagining what our school can be. And I have so much faith in the reporting that we're going to get and the ideas that are going to be generated from this deep dive into analyzing what the needs are of this specific community so that it can reach its full potential. And then I think that's where we come in. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. And I think, go ahead. Okay. So I also think that, I was on the California Reading Coalition and conference that was on Zoom. I'll share the recording when it's available. There were, over 700 participants on the forum this morning. And so many educators across our state, across our country are diving into this data because they're sort of continue to see the impact of distance learning, that interrupted learning, COVID on our demographic, on our students, but especially our SED students, not just in our district, but across the district. You see that dive from the last time they took the CASP in 2019 to when they took it again in 2022, and you could see that huge dip. And we're really trying to claw our way out of it. And as Vice President Conley said, I think that there's so many pieces that I think that are in the right place. And I feel like we're finally sort of moving along, and I'm looking forward to really seeing some strong results from those things, including our literacy specialists, our elementary, our ELA adoption with a focus on science of reading, the sharing best practices across the school sites, because we see some bright spots. And I know those principals, they're having conversations around, what they're doing, the MTSS and the universal data cycles, as was mentioned already, and also the chronic absenteeism, which I'm seeing on site plans. And I think altogether, I think that we're going to see some pretty big changes. I'm pretty confident of that. And I think I look forward to having more conversations around how we're going to support as a board our SED and our Hispanic students.
And we'll bring back our deep dive for Castro at the December 7th meeting and make sure that we're in line with what the board is envisioning, and then talk about sort of what the next steps are that help write the plan that we have in place.
President Berman, procedural
Yes.
question. Could the board consider a quick stretch break and if possible, this last item, that's the transportation routes for choice schools. It's a slide for 16 minutes. The slide is our longest item, longer than our testing or ELA adoption. May we ask since everyone up here has read the full reports, may we ask that they like condense their presentation for the busing report?
The presentation is actually short. It was we were trying to guess how much debate would take place.
Okay, because the slide deck's long, the report's long, so I was a little fearful.
Yeah, no. So we can fly through the slide deck a lot faster.
Thank you.
But we were anticipating back and forth.
Okay, so it sounds like we're going to have a 5-minute bio break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. So it's 8:05, so let's say 8:11. It is now 8:11 and we are back. We are moving on to item C. This is a transportation update, transporting to choice programs. Hi, Ms. Pullman.
Good evening, trustees. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And in the interest of time, I'll jump right in. Alrighty, so today's objectives is to overall look at our current practices, evaluate some of our current constraints, and then talk really about the purpose of this update, which is to provide scenarios around transporting SED students from our choice programs, and ultimately to request board direction. Transportation Mountain View Wisman. Whew, it's quite a complicated department. The goal is to oh, I already did this purpose of transportation update. I don't have to do that. I addressed it in our objectives. So our current practices, we provide transportation to and from school for the following student groups. So students who are McKinney-Vento, students who are residing at Moffett Military Base, identified students with special needs, and per board policy students outside of the 1 mile elementary, 1 mile of the neighborhood school for elementary students. And of course, Mountain View Wilson will continue to provide these transportation services, the to from school for these students. Previous practices. So previously, we have provided transportation to Stevenson students from the Castro-Mistral neighborhood as a part of our regular routes as recently as 2018. So again, it was part of the regular routes. So we used our typical bus routes for that. It did increase ride time slightly for the passengers of that route. And only one student participated at the end of our delivering those services before the pandemic. Our current fleet, we have 11 yellow buses. We've got 6 large buses with a capacity of 48 adults. And I'm sorry, that should say 5 small buses with a capacity of 20. Now, 2 of the 5 large buses are currently active. So 3 would need to be re-inspected and put into use. 4 of the 5 small buses are currently active. 1 is awaiting engine parts. We do have a driver limitation, however. There's only 6 drivers active. We have 0 on reserve. These are the current base operating costs, so just over $1 million a year. Our ridership currently is around 112 riders. Of course, that changes and can change from week to week. You've got the average annual salary, of course, times 6, the bus maintenance, oil and supplies, and then the admin costs for the department. I did call around to all of our neighborhood school districts to ask about transportation and choice programs. And for Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, and Cupertino, none of those school districts do provide transportation for any students to their choice programs. So it's worth noting that our current ridership, so excluding any additional riders, such as SED students from choice schools, has our personnel team really operating at maximum capacity. At additional cost, we're already kind of supplementing some of the constraints by using outside vendor services for some field trips and even some sped transportation services that are really outside of what we're able to do in terms of the minimum number of routes that we've got. So any additional riders would require either additional personnel and or equipment. And it's possible, depending on the increased ridership, it would be both. Some of the constraints or complexities that we're dealing with right now include personnel vacuums, so limited staffing, with a really constrained labor market, especially in the Bay Area, where we've got a lot of other kind of busing initiatives with all the tech companies nearby, although it also is a nationwide concern, as I'm sure you've seen in the media recently. We've got some aging equipment. All vehicles are gas powered, so it's becoming more costly to operate these vehicles with the price of gas and yearly maintenance. The yellow school buses require special training and credentialing. So there is a degree of, or lack of versatility there. We need a specially credentialed driver for those yellow buses. And of course, our transportation needs vary. So some of our routes require large capacity vehicles. Some of our other needs are better fulfilled with smaller vehicles. Currently, we don't have any small vehicle fleets as a part of our yard. So when we initially thought about, well, how would we even begin to estimate the number of students that would need transportation or would be offered transportation? We isolated the socioeconomically disadvantaged populations at both of our choice schools. We excluded populations of students who were originally zoned. Their neighborhood school was either Castro or Therakoff, because they would be within their neighborhood zone at the choice school that they attend. So the max rider participants based on the current numbers for 22-23 would have our max ridership at 152. Majority of those coming actually from Gabriella Mistral, but 36 coming from Stevenson SED population. So if we think about offering or extending the offer of transportation to these students at both choice programs, if 20% or less of the students who were offered the choice to be transported, it would be between 1 and 31 students. So really it could be 1 student, it could be 2 students, it could be 31 students. If 20 to 50% of that population accepted the offer of transportation, it would be 32 to 76. So again, we're really just kind of trying to gauge what the population would look like depending on the interest level. So you can see there are max out at 152. We partner with school bus logistics. And in fact, we have 2 of their experts on to help answer questions at the end. They helped us update all of the routes in TransFinder and actually create mock routes to simulate what would happen if we added additional routes for choice programs. One of the options that they recommended was a shuttle option. In this case, students would arrive independently to their home campus, their neighborhood school, and they would be shuttled to choice programs using district transport services. So they would have to arrive at their neighborhood school. Bell times may need to be adjusted by at least 15 minutes to adjust to this shuttle program, and the vehicles assigned may vary depending on ridership. The pros of this: no new routes would need to be created. It's a less direct impact on the current transportation routes, which, as I expressed, we're really already at max capacity. We can use different kinds of vehicles for this route in terms of accommodating shifts in transportation participation. The cons: bell times would obviously need to be adjusted, which is it's a shift for our district. It may create congestion at neighborhood schools, and the total time it takes for students to arrive at school is longer. It would inevitably require more bus drivers, which have been very difficult to find. The other option for transporting to choice programs is the neighborhood stops option. So this would be students are picked up directly from the neighborhood stop and transported to the choice program. This would require at minimum 3 additional bus routes and likely 3 more drivers and or buses to accommodate this option. We do have 3 currently decommissioned or unused large buses, but they would need to be recommissioned, and of course drivers would need to be hired. The bell times would not need to be adjusted. The vehicles assigned to this task could also vary. The pros of this option is that bell times would not need to be adjusted. It wouldn't increase congestion at the schools. Students would be picked up closer to their home, which would reduce ride time. The cons, of course, it would require 3 additional routes, which would also require 3 recommissioned buses and 3 bus drivers. The cost would have to be endured, of course, year over year, even if the transportation or their participation in transportation choice programs was non-existent or very low. So just other things to consider. Of course, we can explore the ability to recommission the 3 yellow buses that I talked about and hire staff for these large capacity vehicles. The minimum needed to transport to choice programs would be anywhere from 1 to 3 recommissioned buses and anywhere between 1 to 3 yellow bus drivers. Now, if we're unable to hire, the current capacity would not allow an increase in ridership at all. Another thing we could explore is the purchase of smaller vehicles, EV or gas, passenger vans to supplement some of the current routes that have a small ridership number, so that we could swap out those smaller vehicles for some of the smaller buses that are currently being used on those routes and use the larger buses for larger capacity purposes. Now, research does suggest that this is not something we could do in enough time to address choice program transportation for next year, only because of severe limitations on the quantity and availability of the vehicles. Research also suggests that any purchase would need to go, that a lot of these passenger vans, when purchased, don't come with the number of seats that we would need to accommodate the students, so actually have to be modified, would incur further costs. This could optimize our capabilities, enabling us to use larger vehicles for higher capacity needs. And it would also allow flexibility with scheduling based on geographic location and the students served. So we could also explore the feasibility for providing staff for this option, considering that these are commercial vehicles. They don't require a special license to operate. So some other considerations are to continue with current operations, possibly explore hiring an additional driver in order to provide more flexibility for an already overstretched department. This would increase the district's ability to help more with field trips and after-school programs. It wouldn't necessarily increase our capabilities of transporting to choice programs. However, it would provide more flexibility overall. And the potential total costs were really difficult to map out because they varied so widely, but we tried to do our best here in terms of the scenarios. So hiring between 1 to 3 drivers and recommissioning of buses could cost anywhere between $150,000 to $450,000 annually. So those total possible costs are listed there for you as well. The purchase of 3 small vehicles, right now it's really unknown due to the lack of availability. Anywhere between $60,000 to $150,000 per vehicle if modifications need to be made. And of course, the recurring annual cost would be to staff these vehicles. So the total possible costs would be anywhere from $116,000 to about $350,000. The third scenario I talked about, which would be continue operations and try our best to hire another driver, hire and train. The recurring annual cost would be there around 116 as well as the total possible costs. So we need your help. Upon further research, really a lot of research and a lot of thought and effort, a lot of these transportation options explored have their upsides and they have their downsides. I wish that I was bringing to you tonight a perfect solution to the problem. Due to the personnel and vehicle vacuums, it's really difficult to try to make changes in transportation. We want to acknowledge, of course, that resources within the district are finite. So this level of expenditure, when we don't know if or how many students would ultimately be participating in this program, could better serve more students overall if allocated to higher needs initiatives, schools, or projects. So realistically, an investment in this effort, of course, may limit our ability to invest in other efforts. In addition to interviewing our preschool families in 2021, all scouts interviewed families at their sites also about the perceptions, and these did inform those 5 areas of concern that we addressed at board presentations years ago. But I wanted to remind trustees that this data revealed parents care most about proximity, ease of being close to school, and not only for the to-from process, but also if a child is sick, if there's an issue with the school, and they need to be able to go pick up the child during the school day. And they care about community, bonding, and feeling a community with those whom they have shared experiences. This also came up at the recent DAC meeting. And of course, parents care about high quality educational experiences for their children. But the previous studies suggest over and over again that parents would prefer to have high performing local schools for their students rather than an option to attend a different school of choice. So given our previous feedback from the board that we've received, regarding, a myriad of concerns, but some of which are the size of Stevenson being the largest elementary school in the district, the lack of socioeconomic diversity, of course, at Stevenson, which we've been tackling, the reimagining of Castro, which is an upcoming, and of course, equity amongst schools. So would love to get your feedback on what you wish for the district to explore and or prioritize, given all of the information that I've presented today. And again, I want to remind you, we've got Dr. West over here, and we also have 2 of our experts from school bus logistics, if you have any questions about how the mock routes were set up. Thanks, trustees.
Okay. Trustees, let's start with clarifying questions. Yes, Vice President Conley.
Thank you. So first of all, I'm not sure why Landals is included for the list for Ms. Strahl. The Landals enrollment zone, the boundary for that school site, goes to within half a block of the Castro Mistral campus. And so there are families that walk from Chiquita to Landals, which is almost 2 miles away. So I think Landals needs to be cut from that estimate of riders anyways. That's 44 students, because those are students who would be going the same distance. Even if they lived right beside Landals, it wouldn't be different than the current zoning boundary for that school site, which drops the overall rider participants by 30% just right off the bat.
So 108.
Yep. Have we looked at possibly allowing other choice school students who are not SED to pay to ride on the bus as a way to offset the cost of operating the bus.
That's not something that we've explored up until this point.
No, we do. We have that, actually that option that a student can pay to ride the bus. We just don't charge enough to recoup cost. The fees are very minimal.
Okay.
They can work through our transportation department to set up. Not most families don't though, not the elementary schools.
Okay. My next question is about, I know the state has been looking at, there was legislation around EV grants for electric buses and trying to shift school districts over. I'm wondering if, and we have the sustainability initiative that we're pursuing, and so that's something that we want to do long-term anyways. If we started like with one EV bus and that bus, it means not having to recommission a bus, but instead popping over a yellow bus to do this route or using the EV bus for this route. Is that something that's a possibility, and are there offsets from the state for the cost of that?
So there wouldn't be any offsets because our buses meet the age requirement, but they don't meet the mileage requirement because
we don't drive far enough.
We don't drive far enough. And then the second logistical issue that we would need to tackle is the actual charging of it. Our NGO advisor suggests that our current charging system isn't sufficient enough to keep those buses going. So we would just need to explore that. So this, if we want to go this route, yes, we should explore an electric bus, but it looks like we would have to, I don't think that we would be eligible for any offsets. There is legislation, and I think Dr. Westover can talk about this, that will allow, or Director Palmer, that you can get a reimbursement from the state, I think up to 60%, but I think that's just for the ridership. I don't think that is the actual incurred cost.
Okay. And then last spring, there were a lot of conversations about the field trips at Stevenson because we moved to, I believe, not allowing parent drivers any longer. And Stevenson typically does right now 10 field trips per year per grade level. And so the discussion was the district could help provide buses for field trips there and for other school sites. Are we able to meet that need? How many field trips are we supporting at other school sites as well?
So this is Rebecca. We are still struggling to fully meet the needs of Stevenson. Mainly this is due to a driver shortage, not necessarily because we don't have enough buses, but we don't have enough drivers. So to give an example, when we have one driver out, we can still accommodate our routes. When we have two bus drivers out, we start to have to combine routes, and it becomes very difficult for us to offer field trips. But we have been able to accommodate some of the field trips that Stevenson has been requesting.
And what are we providing in terms of field trip support at other school sites?
I can pull the list. It varies. Stevenson, as you brought up, has the most number of field trips, but I believe we've also offered to Castro this year, as well as a couple other school sites.
Thank you. And then, I mean, I think the big glaring question here for me is, you know, if we look at 108 people 108 students who might take this bus, how many of those actually will? How many families, you know, kindergarten parents, for example, don't necessarily always feel comfortable putting a 5-year-old on the bus in the morning and sending them off into the sunrise. And so I'm curious if we've looked at surveying these existing families, or if something like that, to actually get a better sense of, my guess is that maybe half of these families would actually elect a bus.
We haven't done a survey, but I think what's different here is, and I'm thinking about Montaloma and Moffett Field, all of those students are actually assigned to Moffett, to Montaloma, and there's no, they would go to any school that we assign them to, and they sort of go in mass, and then they go as a family, right? So you have brothers and sisters, and then actually the middle school will be on the bus also. So it's a different sort of environment versus, you know, you have one family or two families who are sort of going, or one kid because they're in kinder and not the older sibling that's assigned. So it's a contextually, I think it's a little bit different. But we can definitely ask all of the parents. But so far, at least in, you know, just using the kinders that we have right now, transportation for the one family that dropped out, it had nothing to do with transportation whatsoever. And then for the SED families that actually made it into the lottery, I think, you know, from a kinder standpoint, they weren't really interested. It'll be interesting to ask them next year or in a couple years as their kids get older. That demand may increase, but at least with the little ones, we're not seeing that same demand.
And then my last question, and thank you to my fellow trustees for their patience, is about kind of the recruitment for bus drivers, because my gut looking through this is that regardless, having an extra bus driver would be of benefit for the district beyond what we have now. And that might give us wiggle room to try and pilot a program. So how are we going about recruitment for bus drivers? And are we competitive in what we're offering for them?
We are competitive within our peers, but we're not competitive with VTA and other routes because, and really, the elephant in the room right is the buses that go to the tech companies, right? That's where you're seeing the highest number. So someone can come to work for us, get their CDL, and then eventually they get hired at a job that pays with a contractor that pays a lot more. And that's our biggest challenge. Most school districts run into the public transportation being the biggest issue. They start with the school bus and then they move to Metro, VTA, or something like that. What is unique about us is that our bus drivers are paid for a full day. So we find other tours or tasks for them to do throughout the day, which is unique because most school districts will hire them for part of the day and then they go off and do something else, and then another crew will come back for the rest of the day. So we keep them with us the full 8 hours of the day, and then most do volunteer for the after-school events.
Can we ask Google for a bus driver?
Okay, trustees, yes, trustee Lambert and then trustee Jing.
Yes, thank you for the report. There's a lot of really useful information that made me think sort of very deeply about this problem. I have a lot of comments, but this is a question period. So question, the objective here, immediate objective is to increase the enrollment of SED students at Stevenson. Is there any evidence, I think Trustee Conley asked this, I'll ask it a little bit differently. Do we have any evidence to suggest that if we provided transportation option to anywhere in the district, that that SED students from that area that we provided transportation to, more of them would choose to come to Stevenson? And I'm looking for evidence, not just, yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Sure, yeah. The pool of evidence would obviously be the focus groups that we conducted. We conducted the focus groups with preschool and TK parents who are actively making a choice for their rising kinder students. And then we also asked SCAFs. It was certainly not amongst one of the top priorities when we asked about barriers to choice programs.
I also want to point out the only other anecdotal evidence is before we changed the boundaries, where we had about 25% of the students attending schools outside of the boundaries, ridership was actually low there too. So because we would have provided transportation for anyone who was a mile and a half. And so Montaloma was the beneficiary of this process, right? They had the most students and most students actually didn't take the bus. And I think this is it's a unique situation just because we're talking about elementary students and it's not it's not a direct to and from like the Moffett Field buses. This is one where you're going to ride for a couple miles and make a couple stops before you actually hit your destination.
Yeah, so another way of sort of maybe answering the question, correct me if I'm wrong, is that parents are not asking for transportation to go to school.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Trustee Chang.
Follow-up question from the question about Stevenson and that Trustee Conley was asking. Based on our current busing constraints, does that mean that there were field trips that Stevenson was planning that were rejected simply due to lack of bus transportation?
Yes, that's correct. It doesn't mean they can't contract with or pursue transportation through other means. It just wouldn't be provided through Mountain View Westman.
And since parents can't provide that transportation, the other means would be like a privately licensed insured busing service?
Yeah, there's a couple options actually. Most often we actually partner with Campbell Unified and their transportation department. When Campbell is unavailable, then yes, it would be a private company.
And then which budget does that come out of when we do that?
That would be the school. Well, however the site has allocated, but the cost would not be incurred by the district, it would be at the site level.
So the site level, do we know if at Stevenson, what previously would not have costed any money with parent transportation, is the site level incurring any substantial cost in providing transportation in order to carry out their curriculum of field trips? Do we have the site level principal here? Do we know if there's a dollar amount that's for what Stevenson is now paying for on-site transportation for the field trips?
I'm not able to pull that right now, but we can pull that and let you know. If Terry is on, she can probably also talk through a little bit about where they are. I pulled maybe a week ago looking at the number of routes we had to decline because of not having another bus driver.
PACT has put aside a good amount of their budget this year in anticipation of having to use charter buses or another school district bus to fill the need for field trips. They planned that in their spring budget planning and are doing that this year when our district is unable to meet the need for the field trip.
Thank you. Approximately, Principal Lambert, what is the amount that the foundation has put aside for transportation?
I don't have that off the top of my head. Sorry, Trustee Chang.
Like you say, it's a substantial amount of, it's a for their budget, for whatever their budget size is, it's a large item in their budget?
Yes, it is a large item in their budget, and they made a guess at how much they would need because it's unknown this year since it's the first year.
Thank you, Principal Lambert.
I can tell you, Trustee Chang, that there is an approximate cost for using outside vendors through Campbell, for example. It's about $1,500 per class for a round trip field trip, even using Campbell's transportation services.
In rolling this all over, I remembered I have a friend who was kind of semi-retired and did this sort of, I don't know if it was Lyft or Uber, but some special kid transport thing where she had to get extra licensed and stuff. And I looked up this morning, there's a separate company called Hop, Skip, Drive, which is kind of like that. I'm just wondering if something like that would be more economically viable if we do have parents, if what we're really trying to solve for, which I think is part of the question, is the low socioeconomic students who do not live in the Stevenson area, not having transportation be a barrier for them to go to school. And you said that in 2018, we had exactly one who used the bus, went to Stevenson when we had that available. So I'm wondering if there's some other mechanism, have we explored another mechanism like that to see where we could just kind of tailor it to whatever the need is that year, and it would probably be a lot cheaper.
We use those types of transportations for some of our special ed students. It actually is a lot more expensive when you take in the full ridership, and it doesn't have the ability to transport en masse. It's more for individual students from to and from. The other thing I just want to point out is that every school is faced with the exact same issue when it comes to transportation costs. Every school incurs it. So, I understand where some of the question may go, but I know that the other principals who are sitting here who pay for buses out of their own budget would also argue that they're no different than Stevenson. And if it's the board's desire to allocate funds for transportation, then my recommendation would be that you allocate it for all school sites, not just for one school. And I understand that they were the recipients of the ones of the change, and I completely understand that. I'm not trying to argue that we shouldn't take that into account. I know for a fact I've had this conversation with other principals who are concerned about their own budgets and have been using charters for quite some time, and their PTAs have covered the cost too. So just want to put that one out there. And we do also, just one last point, sometimes we also use Santa Clara to sort of assist us too. But I think there may be some other opportunities, whether it's hiring a bus driver or getting kids to changing the hours of a field trip so that we can get them there. And similar to what we do, like when I take Eli or when I pick Eli up, they get them there to the actual event, and then it's the parents' responsibility to take them back. And there may be some adjustments that we can make there that could also help to facilitate at least getting them there. And then of course, there's also if you're going to San Francisco, you can take the train or use VTA or some other things. So I don't think we've explored all of those options fully just yet.
Okay, I think we've asked our clarifying questions, so we'll move on to public comments and then we'll get into discussion. We have one comment in person and we have one comment on Zoom. We'll begin with our in-person comment. We have Mr. Nelson. There's a button right at the base that has a picture of someone speaking. There you go. And there's 3 minutes on the timer. You can start whenever you're ready, Mr. Nelson.
Good. Now, I don't know, my name is Stephen Nelson. I don't know if I'm going to go overboard on this one. And I decided to take apart the thing where I was talking about Laura Brakely's mom, because sometimes, I'm going to start with that instead. Sometimes when we give transportation to people, we give them for free. I know an old lady who wanted transportation to her church Sundays, and I helped give that to her. It happened to be Laura's mom. So sometimes we do things not because what the cost is. Sometimes we do it for what's called agape love. Not that we love a particular person, like me loving her mom, but that we do it for community. And so I think you need to think of that this way. The other thing, the state of California is going to pay 60% of whatever it is this thing costs. There was obviously a crusty question that wanted to bloat up how much that straw man would cost to a $2 million busing. It isn't going to be that way. It's obviously bloated to say there's 600 students at Stevenson's, a bloated fraction of SED, and a bloated assumption of 100% of SED wanting to use a free bus. Trustee Conley has asked a few really good comments, questions on things like, have we done a survey of the SED parents and said specifically about transportation? So why might a school administrator be so clearly running away from any idea of transportation for poor kids to end segregation at Stevenson, only Stevenson? Is it because of the bus, the word busing? You gave a direction to decrease segregation at Stevenson by making a lottery work. Research shows that crafting a transportation system well with poor parents' input on transportation, not everything else, can make a successful lottery. One that poor parents will want to enter. One that will get Stevenson district parity, which is what you were aiming for. You weren't aiming to start a big multi-million-dollar bus transportation system. I think your administrator may suffer from busing shell shock, a dramatic experience, administrative trauma from working in North Carolina during the Charlotte Mecklenburg desegregation busing. Imagine way over 10,000 students, hundreds of schools and hundreds of bus routes per day to and fro, and then a winter snowstorm in an unexpected and unprepared southern climate. So that's chaos, administrative nightmares. I'd like to hear what he might tell us about a story sometime when he had a busing meltdown where he worked before. We're in the 21st century. I'm glad a couple of you guys have been asking questions. Laura asked some good questions. Devin asked some good questions about using an idea of think differently, because I don't see.
Okay, we have a comment, one online. Ms. Liu, we'll put up a timer for 3 minutes and you'll be able to unmute yourself in just a moment. Okay, there it is, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm so glad that Trustee Conley and Trustee Chan brought up the bus situation at Stevenson for our OLEs, because the OLEs is an important part of our PPL curriculums. And so implementing that bus rule last year make it a lot harder for us. I mean, it's now we have to budget for 20% of our budget going toward busing. Well, that money could have gone elsewhere, like maybe toward professional development, other programs that would benefit our students. But, we have, and for me, I've had friends from the other districts who were still okay with parent drivers, parents in Cupertino, friends in Santa Clara, even Burlingame recently brought back parents driver. So the bus situation, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. I just want to bring it up that, it's just money that could have gone elsewhere to help us students directly instead of going toward bus, especially with the bus driver shortage, which we, brought up last year when this was, this was brought up to our school. Thank you.
Okay, so now we can move into discussion. Trustee Cheng, would you like to comment?
Thank you. First comment regarding seeking board feedback about providing busing to our choice schools, particularly in support of diversifying the school sites. I'm actually fully against it, and let me explain why. If we just use the middle numbers, we don't know how many students would use these buses at the cost of it. So if we put somewhere between $148,000 to $500,000, which is in the report, if we just use the middle number of what students might take this, you're looking at $10,000 per student. And we're looking at, as was asked by Trustee Lambert, this isn't even a primary ask of the parents who are of this demographic. If we're talking $10,000 per student, and that's just ballpark, we don't even know what we'd spend and how many would use it. That could have been used for after school care. That could be used for other instructional needs, support services, things that actually have an instructional impact. Like expanding bus services feels like it's a solution chasing that non-existent problem. And the last part I just want to share is I appreciate Trustee Conley asking about the Stevenson and about regarding our policy change last year to not allow parent drivers. I strongly encourage us as a board to revisit that issue. There's very few things we do that we're in the classrooms. And sometimes the things we do here really help. It's rarely we pass a policy that literally makes people's lives harder. And our changing of not allowing parents to volunteer to drive in the district literally made the lives harder to provide a dynamic form of instruction in our school district. In fear of protecting the kids and liability, I looked up right now for this year, there's, MVLA, high school district, Palo Unified, Sunnyvale, every school district around us still has the policy we had before, which was you need to be fingerprinted, you need to have enough liability insurance coverage, and they've never had issues, nor have we had issues. It was a solution chasing a problem that we did. And we have the power to change that. There's absolutely no reason why any school site, not just Stevenson, but any school site should be having to save money to hire commercial transportation when for years parents were driving their students without issue. it's a core part of a community experience, I think, for to I I I really hope we actually put that back on the agenda and revisit that because we made that decision. And no other school district around us makes that decision. And since this agenda item is about transportation for choice programs, I really hope that this board, the other colleagues here will say, you know, we need to look at that. Maybe we went too far, especially since when we passed it, we were under the assumption that we could fulfill the needs. Now knowing that school sites are having to allocate parental funds to provide field trips, from an equities level, like I think this is we should revisit that. If my colleagues here are not willing to revisit changing the policy and having it align with other school districts, then while I would not support increasing busing for to meet unknown parent needs, if the question was we're not going to change our policy, but students existing school sites need buses for field trips, I would personally welcome then receiving a budget request for us to have enough buses to meet all our field trip needs. I think that is an instructional impact. So if this came back to us saying, okay, this is the number of buses we need so that school sites aren't having to allocate their foundation or their PTA budget for field trips, then I'd like to see that. But if this is a question about providing buses to diversify our choice schools when the families have not even asked for it, I would absolutely no.
Trustee Lambert.
I have two sort of general topics to talk about. So following up on my question about the parents' interest in busing for the SED students to attend specifically Stevenson, you know, it's very clear from this presentation that setting up a transportation infrastructure is a huge logistical challenge. It's going to cost a lot of money in personnel and resources, and it really is a long-term commitment. I would not, I think it's premature to commit to, some of the a large transportation program in our district until there's a demonstrated need. Now, I would be willing to, on a very small basis, offer transportation to SED students to attend Stevenson, to try to get the number of applicants into the TK and the K programs. In just a couple, one or two areas on a small basis to see if we can attract more applicants. And if it turns out that we're not successful in doing that, that to me answers the question that it's not a real barrier of transportation. We can just sort of, table this for the time being, at least as a solution for increasing SED enrollment at Stevenson. My second comment is it has to do with the very last slide, and maybe Director Pullman did this on purpose, but as I sort of read through this, I sort of thought that, we're putting so much emphasis here on changing the socioeconomic diversity at Stevenson. And yet, as brought up earlier in the discussion by Trustee Blakely, some of our schools already have tremendous diversity. Vargas and Landals as examples. Therakoff and Montaloma would have tremendous diversity, but for Stevenson, because a disproportionate number of families come out of those communities. Castro would have excellent diversity, but for the boundaries in that school district, and in that school area. So what we should be doing is, rather than focusing on increasing the diversity at Stevenson, is using the diversity we have and making all of our schools choice programs. And I don't mean like Stevenson, okay? But what I mean by that is having these schools where parents want to send their kids to because of the curriculum, because of after-school programs, because of well-funded enrichment activities, we spoke here about many more field trips. This is what parents are looking for. This is what parents are sending their kids to Stevenson for. We want to make all these other schools like that so that parents are equally wanting to send their kids to all of the schools in our district. Okay, not just piling them up in Stevenson, making it sort of the largest school in our district with a huge waiting list. Doesn't that tell us something about what the parents want in our district? Okay, yes, it does. And so we should be making our schools like that. And we're spending so much time here focusing on what's really a very difficult, it turns out to be a very difficult problem is making Stevenson more diverse. Okay.
Vice President Conley.
Thank you. So to add some context on the field trip situation at district schools, Stevenson, to my understanding, was the only school site that was using parent drivers. Most other school sites don't have that as a practice. And Mistral, for example, there are 3 field trips a year funded by the PTA. There is no district funding for the field trips that are taking place. I don't know the breakout of the PTA budgets at the other school sites, but I think that PTAs are often ponying up. And so I'm sorry to hijack your agenda item, Dr. Rudolph, but I would be interested in seeing a future item, perhaps looking at transportation around field trips for schools within our district, where maybe it's a minimum of every child gets 1 to 3 field trips. It's something like that that our district is supporting, as opposed to having an inequitable funding source for that. Because having been a teacher and now as a parent, like I would love for my child right now to be going on 10 field trips a year, but that's really, really expensive. And the school he's at doesn't have the PTA budget to support that. So my child doesn't have access to that, right? I don't think it means that we're necessarily going to be able to fund 10 field trips a year at Stevenson, but I would like to see something across the district. Now, if that means hiring, a unicorn of a bus driver or 2, they sound very hard to find. Those bus drivers would be mostly targeting times during the school day, which does open them up to run a pickup and drop off route before and after school. And so that might be the place to then survey the families who are going to the choice schools about whether or not they would want to use that service or to pilot it, sort of like what Trustee Lambert was talking about, to select a couple of areas, perhaps based on zip code, or even just to try a pilot run. If we bring on a school bus driver and we're employing them full time, why not occupy them during that morning hour before the field trips would start? So I think that could be a win-win, but it is costly. It sounds like one bus driver is about $150,000.
It was 115.
It's 148. It looks like, with the total cost. So recommissioning a bus and then hiring an additional driver would probably be about $150,000. If that provides more field trips for all of our students across the district, I think that's really valuable.
Yes, Trustee Blakely.
Again, not to go too off script on the field trip point, I also think we have a great tradition in our school district of walking field trips. I know they do those at Stevenson. My kids went to Landals. We walked to the library. We walked to City Hall. We walked to a variety of places. And sometimes when I'm out in the middle of the day, I'll see kids walking. It just makes me smile. You see a whole couple of classes. So I don't think field trips necessarily have to involve transportation, although of course that would open up the scope of things that would be eligible, destinations that would be eligible. I also think this might be something that MVEF might be interested in supplementing perhaps. But back to the school bus thing, I agree with Trustee Lambert's initial comments that until we can demonstrate the demand, it doesn't seem to justify the expense. And I think that some of the money, as was outlined here, could be spent in places that would make more of a direct impact. And I still think there might be some more tailored ideas. If there were like 3 kids at the school that wanted to come, that there might be alternate solutions along the lines of that hop, skip, drive. So I really appreciate all the work that has gone into this. I mean, we've had several meetings about this and worked with consultants, and I think it merited looking into deeply, but I'm not so sure that what we found justifies moving forward, at least at this time.
Trustees, I'll jump in for a moment. So it sounds like the Stevenson, every grade level, just for your information, allocates $8,500 per grade level for extra field trips. So I know that was a question of how much the parents set aside, and that's how much it is. I agree with feeling like, we look at the data and there is no data to demonstrate that there's a desire to have busing for our families. I've said it ever since I've joined the board. If we want to know something about what our SED families need, we need to ask them. And we've been asking them. I don't believe in implementing things that everybody else thinks is a good idea without asking them specifically about what they need. What they're telling us that they need is that they want to feel in community with their neighbors at a school that's accessible to them and at a school that will welcome them and where they feel a connection. That tends to be their neighborhood school. I can't argue with that. And if the busing isn't top on their list, I'm not opposed to funding a bus. I'm opposed to funding it when I don't hear our community saying, when I don't hear those specific parents saying that we want a bus so we can get to that school. So I think with Stevenson, we have an initiative to focus on this lottery, tailoring it. Maybe it's not moving as fast as quickly as maybe we had hoped. Ultimately, the issue is that parents aren't applying. The parents we would like to see applying aren't applying to that school. So we have more work to do around that as well. And I think we continue to sort of survey explicitly around the transportation piece, because perhaps when the demand truly is there, we do it, right? But I think that, we look at that statistic about what a highly effective board spend their time talking about, and it's about students, right? And where do we put the energy in as a school district? And that's on our students. And when we look at the concentration of our SED students, they are in the Castro area, which tells me we are moving in the right direction of let's focus the staff time, the staff energy on that initiative of reimagining the school site so that students can truly reach the full potential, so that families can have that neighborhood school. I think the good that comes from the work to re-envision will then impact the work that other schools are doing to serve this demographic as well. So yeah, I feel like, the demand isn't there, so I'm not for the funding. An interesting idea to try a pilot. It does sound like we do need another bus driver. I think it would be helpful. So if we can find that unicorn, that would be really terrific. And I'm not for creating a logistical nightmare of changing schedules and thinking of routes. If there's an opportunity to sort of try at some point, try something very small out at a specific, one specific pickup site, just to sort of see what kind of feedback we get, that would be great. But I don't want to change our district start time or, sort of go down that path, because I think we need to prioritize what our district is putting energy into it. And as we can see with all the initiatives we have, from greening to reimagining Castro, to our literacy, and to the ELA, and I'm sure math will come next at some point, right? When we look at our data, I just want to be careful that we're really focused on having a little bit of restraint, because it's easy to ask for a lot, but we want to have good results with what we've asked for already. So I think we just have to pace ourselves. Yes, Trustee Lambert.
I want to have just one sort of comment, just to thank Director Pullman and Dr. Westover for putting this together. That even though I think we may not be implementing a busing program for Stevenson immediately, all this information is really, really good background and I think provides really good information to help us as we go on and address other issues in the district, sort of understand what it would take to put a transportation program together. So, the fact that this might not go forward for Stevenson is, nobody should feel disappointed. This information is extremely valuable. So thank you.
Yes, Trustee Chang.
Yes, I appreciate the time staff took to prepare this presentation. For us as a board, I do continue to ask the question of why we spend so much time on this issue of it's a worthy goal to diversify Stevenson, but we're talking about anywhere between 1 to a dozen students who would be impacted by this. In a school district of over 4,000 students, this choice issue has been an agenda item, a retreat issue. We've spent so much time on somewhere between 1 and 12 students gained. Why, when there's so many other issues that impact? We talked about effective school districts focus on instruction and focus board time on instruction. Effective school districts also focus their time on things that impact the most students. I respect what the staff is presented to us, but at a leadership level, like there's several things I feel like we aren't talking about enough here. Talk about our role and why is the choice program the largest school in our district, right? Also, this idea, why are we spending money to further send more students away from their neighborhood school to a choice school? When Stevenson, or when it was PACT, was first created, there was an ethos about 10, if you go a decade or further back, was they just kind of wanted to be left alone by the school district. They were small, they didn't ask for much. It's back when they were in the kind of the unconventional buildings here. And their ethos back then was, it was a parent participation program, and they just wanted to be left alone and they're not going to ask for anything. And here we are potentially asking to spend, we're talking between $148,000 and $400,000, about $500,000. That's half the funding for the Education Foundation gets each year. The Education Foundation only raises $1 million a year. This the trade-off. I just don't understand. And when you I appreciate what President that you were mentioning the thing about the $8,000 that Stevenson raises each grade to cover transportation. If we're wanting to talk about Stevenson being an inclusive place, the fact that there is this culture now, in order to carry out their field trips, which has always been a core part of the program, always has been, that fact that now there's a pressure that each class has to raise $8,000. If I was a family who, I can speak for myself. I'm a teacher. I'm not upper class. And if I walk into a class and I go, oh, now I know I need to raise $8,000 as a class just for the class program to be carried forward, I don't know if I feel welcome in a place that has that pressure, right? And that's a pressure we created, right? Like the fact that every year each class needs to raise $8,500 to carry out their field trips. And if I'm a family walking into that grade level, that's an expectation now I'm having to enter. How does that feel welcoming, right? So, so per grade level, still that's a lot. That's a lot. If you look at some of their school sites, if you look at the amount of money raised by the PTA at Monte Loma, or or anything like that as a school site, $8,000, $8,500 is a lot per grade. And so I appreciate and so fully support what Trustee Conley said about bringing transportation back as a broader issue, because it's like on one level we're saying let's have a bus so that people feel welcome to go to Stevenson. Another level, we created a policy where Stevenson now needs to raise money for each grade level, and we think that's going to be welcoming for families. And so this is stuff that we need to look at, and that a choice program still has the same detrimental impact that a charter school has, right? You're taking families who select out of a neighborhood school and concentrate them in a single place, right? This is exactly the reason why the school district rejected Paul's charter school. So it's like, I just welcome us getting to talk about the last slide, which is not on the agenda, but the slide about Castro and other things. Let's put that on the agenda and let's get away from the Stevenson choice program issue.
We'll try to synthesize the direction in just a second, but go ahead.
Oh, thank you. It's so interesting that you bring up Bullis at the end, Trustee Chang, because Bullis is precisely why we have been talking about Stevenson. So when Bullis, and this was 2018, my very first meeting as a school board trustee. It was quite the induction. When Bullis came to the Mountain View Wisman School District, their argument, they were trying to meet a requirement from the county that they increase the proportion of low income and English language learner students within Bullis charter. That had been the biggest knock that the county had against their charter, is that it didn't represent the diversity of the Los Altos School District, particularly around special ed, but just in general, the diversity of the county either. And so they felt that they could meet that need by having a charter within Mountain View, which has a more diverse population. And one of the things that we asked them to do in their charter, we changed the charter that we adopted, we edited it. And we said that your demographics need to be representative of the community that you serve. Because our concern was that it would, a Bullis charter within the Mountain View Wisman School District would end up being very similar to the one in Los Altos in that it would not be representative of our district's diversity, but instead probably attract mostly affluent families who did not have special needs, who were not English language learners, who were not socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so we set this mark ourselves for Bullis charter, and it was something that they could not figure out how to do. They ended up canceling their lottery night and kind of refusing to implement that process, and then we revoked their charter. So I see this as an existential question for our district. We have many resources that are not equitably distributed. We can go back and forth about the housing and school segregation argument. It's really tied to residential segregation within our community. And, there are different ways that we can try to address that with boundaries, with transportation, but there's not a silver bullet on it. I think it's actually more of a housing issue and an inclusionary zoning issue, and about how we increase density in different areas. Or community land trust. I mean, there's so many different ways to address the housing, but I think that fundamentally it's about residential segregation. That being said, I don't think we could hold our heads up as a district if we didn't change the lottery at Stevenson to make it possible and do this work to make it possible for our very own choice program to actually be reflective of our school district. It sounds like the majority of the board is not interested in transportation right now because we don't have kind of concrete evidence that that's actually what's needed in this situation, which makes sense. It sounds like hopefully we'll keep surveying and asking and working on this problem, but I don't think this is about 12 students. I think this is about the moral and ethical compass of our school district and how we serve our community more broadly and our values, how we value the diversity within our district. And we have prioritized as a board goal this year, re-envisioning Castro. We're going to have study sessions about it. We're going to be really diving into how are we serving this population. And we also know that we have boundaries on the horizon in the next few years. So that's going to come to our plate at some point, and I'm sure it will be part of the conversation.
Vice President Conley, I think you synthesized for me a little bit, so thank you. I appreciate it. So what I heard was the direction has been no to transportation because we don't have the data to support that need at the time, but let's continue to monitor it, and maybe it's something we revisit in the future, perhaps. I also heard about maybe looking at busing just through the lens of field trips. So looking at maybe equity of field trips that are across our schools and seeing if we have the buses and the drivers available that can accommodate the field trips to make sure that, that there is a sense of equity across our school districts. Is there an agreement about that direction?
No, and the equitable resources for the schools, for the kids to participate.
For field trips?
Yes. Because right now, there's many schools who can't afford field trips, right?
Correct.
They hire bus drivers and buses and would only.
Trustee Blakely? Just want to make sure we get that direction.
Just going to say, I think it's so much deeper than that, though, because it's also after school programming and there's other things. I don't think it's just field trips. So
I think what we can do is bring back some ideas, whether it's budget or I was texting Rebecca saying, hey, we need to talk about this. And like one of the things, one simple solution is you change the time that you start a field trip, right? So there's always the expectation that you're there right at the start of whatever, like, you know, the museum opening. Instead of being at the start, you get there. And I know like no one wants to get there at 10 o'clock, then you lose time, but it's possible that you start after the bus routes finish, which allow you the opportunity to use the school buses, right? So if we have eight, that's 8 buses that can travel and get you a place. But part of that's a compromise between transportation and schools that hasn't happened yet. So I think there's some options that we can do and that will enable us to bring back, here are some solutions to this problem, which I don't think we fully explored because we've been focusing on other stuff. So we can bring, whether it's in a report or whether it's like, we can bring back some options that make this a little bit more palatable and make it a little bit more equitable across sites. That's sort of what I took away from it without spending.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. And it doesn't sound that something that also came up was this idea of a very, very tiny pilot. But I think that until we have the extra capacity for transfer a bus driver, I don't know that we can even explore that yet.
And we'll keep looking. I mean, part of the recommendation was to get something that was smaller. I think we can keep looking at some of those options to see, like, if the demand arises, if it's free, could we use a small bus? Could we merge some routes? I think we can explore those things and sort of take it from there. So we will keep an eye on demand and come up with some solutions for that.
Okay. Trustees, did we get everything? Great. Okay. Terrific. Okay, now we can move on. We are moving on to, let's see, last item under discussion, board member request. We have an amendment to board bylaw 9120, officers of the Board of Trustees. This was a request that was brought forward by Trustee Lambert. Trustee Lambert, would you, if there's any other additional information you'd like to share, this is a good time to share it. Yeah, just unmute your microphone.
Sorry. Yeah, I would like to make a proposal to change our bylaws so that the officers of the board are sort of elected sequentially so that it provides an opportunity for every member of the board to serve as president during his or her, at least once during his or her 4-year term. The reason I'd like to make that change is, first of all, we're all elected officials. We've been elected by a constituency. Our constituencies deserve to have us be in leadership positions. And being on a board like the school board is often the first opportunity for residents to serve in an elected capacity as a representative of their community. And it's a great learning experience that everybody should have the opportunity to participate in. And it's also a personal learning opportunity for the individuals. So people should, every member of the board should have that opportunity. I'd also say too that we all deserve to respect everybody on the board equally. And part of that is providing everybody on the board and encouraging them to take those leadership positions. I would be amenable to making certain requirements, participation in meetings, attending leadership classes at CSBA meetings and things like that, to help people get used to the idea, learn what it's about, but also too, as part of the process, as we do here even now, is a person should serve as a clerk, vice president, and then become the president, sort of take different responsibilities on the board. Yeah, that's my proposal. And yeah, I would like to support that and have that put in place as soon as possible.
Okay, trustees, any questions? Okay, if there is a public comment.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Do you feel that's lacking?
What is lacking? The respect for each other on the
The
board?
respect, I mean, I think everybody on this dais has served as president,
Not in their current 4-year term.
but there's 5 people also, so there's some mathematical.
No, that works.
I'll just-
It works. It works the way we have staggered elections. We're not all elected at once. We're staggered.
Okay, then well, if
So and that's the point. During their 4-year term.
any other clarifying questions to ask now? No? And we'll move on to public comments. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment on this topic, you can raise your hand in Zoom, or if you're joining us in person, you can fill out a speaker card and you may bring it up to Dr. Rudolph. I'm not seeing any hands up. So, so trustee comments. Yes, trustee Chang.
I appreciate Trustee Lambert bringing up this conversation. While I'm not opposed to what Trustee Lambert is proposing, I do think that it's hinting at the right issue, but not actually directly addressing the right issue. And in my opinion, the right issue is, respectfully, is that why are people vying to be board president? When I was formerly on the board president didn't have more power than other members in the board. So when Trustee Lambert and I served as board presidents, it wasn't something we sought. It was more like you received the apology from the rest of your board that sorry you had to, it's like your turn to do service for the board. So it's been a shift that when I noticed when I was watching this board before being elected and then being on this board, that like it's new to me that there are people vying, like particularly maneuvering to get into certain positions, whether it be, Trustee Wheeler seeking to be in a certain position when she retired, or wanting to be in a certain position because the first time around was during the pandemic and things like that. We didn't do that in the past. It was, and when I look at the city council, it's the same thing. People, it's like I'm a little nervous about like forcing us to be rote. I kind of wish we could just go back to our previous culture, which was the previous culture was that we didn't incrementally put more and more authority behind the scenes. Because what's happened since I was last on the board and now is that now future agenda items go straight to the president. They're not discussed publicly as a dais, right? There is a lot of authority that's now put in the board president that makes it an attractive role for somebody to want to be in. When in the past, they didn't. And I think that the reason I think that's a central issue is that when so much is happening behind the scenes with the board president and the superintendent, it not only dismisses the democratic aspect that we are all equals elected by the community, it also dismisses that the magic of a board is that we're diverse. And this is such a talentedly diverse board that there's magic in the discussion of us 5, including the wisdom of our superintendent and staff and as part of that. And then we discuss as a 5 and we decide as a 3 plus, right? But it's a discussion of 5. But there's so many agenda items and issues that are kind of largely now decided behind the scenes, not publicly and not by all of us 5. So, so for me, the more.
Can you provide an example?
I'm just talking about like, I don't know how agenda items get onto our, like before when I was on the board previously, I would know why something got on the agenda. Like when in the meeting, there's a future agenda items and we talk, oh, let's put this on agenda. Then board president works with the superintendent and figures out where does it logically fit. But now agenda items pop up and I don't know why that's now something we're talking about. On the further issue of just like about equity, I personally, like when serving the board president was one of the hardest things I did. And when we lost our superintendent and had to do a search process and was doing all the communications for the district. Thankfully, we hired Dr. Rudolph, and I appreciate and I'm grateful for us connecting and him being our community. I could care less if I'm ever board president, but I'm deeply concerned as a process that this board has, in my opinion, and I know we are not on this board anymore. It's not members on this board right now, but the previous board, actively kept Trustee Caldonado off the board when he actively sought to be board president. For the reasons that Trustee Lambert said, being board president gives a different perspective, builds a different relationship with the superintendent, and makes us all better because then everyone has that ability to understand how the superintendent works and supporting district leadership. And our board conscientiously kept him off the board. And whether this board likes to admit or not, I think there's a conscientious effort to keep me off the board, off the board leadership. Do I really care? No, I don't. I don't care if I'm board president, but I do think that it's become a political process. And I think that's unfortunate. I think the school district is hurt by the politics that's played on the diocese about putting people's opinion about people. I've had a trustee up here say to me, it's like, oh, you should step into a board on this term around after I've already served as clerk, vice president, and president as a 20-year educator with 2 masters in education. To say to me, oh, you can serve on the board, lead roles when you become used to it and you're ready for it. That was said by a member of this board. And I won't say who, but saying that, like, I will consider you for board leadership when you're ready for it. And to me, that's like they're mistaking that they disagree with my policy decisions with their thoughts of what my credentials are. Now, I'm not going to make this by myself because I really, I fully support Trustee Lambert's thing, which will mean that I'll support Vice President Connolly as next president, and then our clerk as president after that, and totally fine never serving. But I just put out there that there's politics involved up here. That's unfortunate.
I just want to comment on the agenda items because I'm a little confused about, well, since there is confusion about how items come up on the agenda, if any board member requests an item, which, people do, I hope everyone here can sort of say that their item has been addressed in some way, whether it got put on the agenda, you got a response right away, you had a conversation with Dr. Rudolph. And if you go back and look at our agendas, they're all things that we have asked the district to bring back to us, and it's a matter of just scheduling. So that we I sit down with Dr. Rudolph and say, when does it make sense to talk about transportation? Let's look at the year coming up. Let's look at the meetings that are coming up. We have things that we have to talk about. There's the budget. We have to look at iReady. We have to look at CAS. So there's so many routine agenda items that a school district has to go through. It's more, I think the task we always have is here is the ask of the board and where do we fit that in. So I don't think that there's anything on the agenda, at least I don't think, and I can't think of one, that is a shock or a surprise that's being discussed. I feel like most things are pretty routine, and the job I have is to work with Dr. Rudolph to see when to put it in a way that makes sense so we can get all our updates in an appropriate time. Does that make sense?
Isn't there a master agenda that we all have the link to so that we can look at what's coming
Governance
up?
calendar. We have the matrix that lays out.
The matrix.
We looked at it at our retreat. It lays out the whole year.
Perhaps presumably a board president can decide to add, presumably, correct? Which I think that's where the responsibility lies, right? As a board president, I guess presumably a president could decide that they want to throw things that haven't quite been the direction of the full board just because they think that those are the things that the board president thinks that they should be discussed. But I think that that's where, it's important to have, be able to set priorities and have discipline and really think about what your whole board is telling you as a president, to make sure you're carrying out the wishes of the board in an efficient way, which I really hope to try to do this year. So I don't feel like my meetings with Dr. Rudolph are trying to think of what else to put into our agenda that's different from what we've discussed here. Definitely not, they've honored any request. There've been very few of things to put in our agenda. So I just want to address that because I don't want there to be this misconception out there that the board president yields this. Again, maybe a board president does. That's not the practice of this board. And I think that the way that the CSBA has worded this policy is around, the board should nominate the officers, right? And I don't feel compelled to change that. When I've over the years since last year, this conversation came up last December. I've had many opportunities to talk to many different board members from across our state, from across our country. This question always comes up for me. How do you decide on your board president? And they always say, well, we elect them. I said, well, don't you do a rotation? No, we don't do a rotation. Some people said, well, it's more of an unwritten norm, but if you put it in, if you write it down, then you're pretty much forced. And what do you do when there are issues on the horizon, when you know that there is a best person to address some of those issues on the horizon, right? You want to be able to have as a board that flexibility. So again, I think, for the most part in boards, I've heard that there is a norm, but I think most boards can probably tell you years when that has been an exception. And I think that includes this board as well. Vice President Conley.
Thank you. So I think there are two different things that we're discussing right now. One is a little bit about like kind of the culture of our board, it sounds like, Trustee Chang, and the other is kind of the bylaws proposal itself. I'm going to talk about the bylaws proposal itself first. So I don't know if any of you have been following what's going on in the Franklin McKinley School District right now. Trustee Mark Cooper was elected to that board in the election last year, and he is interested in things like banning certain books. He is anti-critical race theory and claims the district is teaching critical race theory, even though it's not. He's working with, I might get this wrong, so I see our reporter in that. There are many articles online about it, but I think it's Moms for Liberty or a similar type group in Silicon Valley that is anti-LGBTQ+ as well. And so his board, they have had some very contentious meetings over the last month or so, and his board censured him. But I imagine we are very fortunate in that I think everyone on this dais protects and values all of our students and our employees in our community, right? Like I don't think we have this issue with our board, but it doesn't mean we might not in the future, because there is a growing movement of politicizing school boards in a way that actually takes away rights from children and takes away rights from families. And so I'm interested in kind of future proofing for that. And so that's my main objection to making this a lockstep, everyone gets to be president, because I guarantee you the Franklin McKinley trustees do not want this trustee that they have censured and who wants to roll back rights for students to be their board president. And I agree with that. And so, and when I look forward, just in the next 5 years in Santa Clara County with the organizing that I've seen by different groups, I do think we could face that type of issue as a board.
Yep. So my comment to that is that there is a mechanism to handle that, and that's the censure. And when I was on the board, when Chris and I were on the board, we had to censure a trustee.
Oh, you
and
did?
that trustee was not an officer, was not to be president. And so that's how you handle it. But it's still, everybody still had that opportunity, except right in those extreme circumstances. To Trustee Berman's point,
No, you can finish and then I'll go.
I forget what you were saying.
Okay. And then we had a public comment that looked at our surrounding school districts. So Palo Alto Unified School District, they elect their officers. The Los Altos School District elects their officers. Sunnyvale elects their officers. But they only nominate themselves. They don't nominate each other. And then they vote. And Santa Clara Unified, the officers are elected by the voters of the school district, which was fascinating. It's sort of like having a separate vote for a mayor, right?
So before I put this out, I read some articles at the CSBA. I went on their website and saw what they had in officers, how they appoint officers. Articles I read said that it is very more typical that the officers went step by step so that everybody had the opportunity to take a leadership position and get the experience. So it depends on your sources, and I think the bottom line is it varies very much from district to district.
Yeah, I think it varies.
And I really don't, honestly, I'm not interested in doing, even if whatever it was, I'm not interested in what the average district does. I'm doing want to do what's right for our district and what's best for the board members that we have in our district, and to treat them respectively, provide everybody that opportunity. So once somebody gets on the board and says, gee, I'm going to be president someday, I have to put my effort into it. I have to learn about it. I can't wait to be it. And we all should encourage them to be president and, learn, take the next steps and basically be good citizens about it.
Yeah, I don't think I would like to finish. I would like to finish, Trustee Lambert, if that's okay. I'm happy to finish my comments and hand it off, and you can say as much as you need to, because I think you have a lot more to say. I just wanted to, so I kind of spoke to, like, policy wise, this isn't a policy that I support, and here are the reasons. When it comes to our board culture, so the way that the agenda, it's interesting to frame it as vying for president, because I don't think anyone actually wants to be president. It is a very, very, very hard job, especially responding to community comments, being the public voice for the board, having to run the meetings and herd all of the cats that we are. I'm sorry, President Berman. It is a really, really hard job and stressful and exhausting. There was one year in my first term where we had actually Trustee Tamara Wilson served as president for 2 years in a row, because we felt that she was the best person at that time to actually hold the center for the district in the business that we were dealing with at that time. And I think I can't speak for previous boards that have, where someone has not gotten to serve as president, because I wasn't on the board with Trustee Coladinato, for example. When we had our conversation last year, I think what came up was a concern that there hadn't been an interest previously, Trustee Chang. And then you have responded, why should I have to be saying that, like, this is like, why isn't it something that it's just considered that we're all here for leadership? Which I think is completely fair and legitimate. And so, I don't know how things are going to play out when we throw all the names up into the air and figure out who's going to be board president for next year. I don't know how that's going to play out this year. But I do think we have a really solid process around, for President Berman, reining in the president. We have a governance calendar that we looked at our retreat that laid out this huge matrix of when different things were already planned, and then all of the things that we've been hearing are things that the majority of the board has asked to hear, or Trustee Lambert has had 2 agenda items now, for example, that have been brought to the board. So I think I think President Berman has, I don't know, has anyone proposed an agenda item to President Berman that has been rejected? Not I. And then even if in the unlikely situation where President Berman said no, which is not something I think she likes to say, we have a process where that item can then be brought to the board to be voted on whether or not we want to have it come forward. So I think there's a difference between discussing, when we have the future agenda items, piece as an agenda piece, that was to propose a new idea. It wasn't, here are all the things that are going to be on your next agenda for the next meeting. Maybe what would be helpful, I don't know, but if it's what you're looking for, it might be just having a bit of a preview about what topics are coming when, just an update on what topics are coming when as the schedule shakes out a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think this is not a board of, well, and I don't want to be insulting. I don't see this as a board of like savvy political movers who are trying to vie for top rank. And I feel like there might be a little bit of a dig at me as though I am that person, and that is not who I am at all. I just want our team to be really successful. And I think we all want that. And so it's kind of figuring out how we get there.
Okay, Trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's comments. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I concur with a lot of what Trustee Conley just said. For me, when I read the word elect in the template bylaws that we had, I think those originate from CSBA. And I looked up the definition of elect and it talks about voting. So for me, that goes with the territory. And I also, it's not a political thing. It's just, I want the best leader for our board that will help, who will help make us the most effective board. And we all have different leadership talents and specialties and things we're good at and things that maybe were, not quite our forte. And there are times when I think particular people are better at managing this process. And, my favorite little topic about keeping the main thing, which I feel like we sometimes get distracted on this board. And so I'm not in favor of the bylaw amendment. And also you said you looked at the CSBA stuff. I know last year when I was at the CSBA conference, they said, about 70% of boards do have a norm. And I think it was a norm. I don't think it was a bylaw, but it was a norm of a rotation. And about 30% don't. And I can think of other, Foothill De Anza just censured somebody. I can think of other boards that have done that. Also, there's a board, is it Burlingame? Dr. Rudolph, we had a facilitator with one of our law firms, who's one of the main guys at the law firm a few years back. Is it Greg Danis?
Greg Danis.
Greg Danis. I mean, they just perennially elect him as their board president, and it's easy for him. And that's what that, I mean, I haven't talked to those board members, but apparently, I don't even know if he's still serving there, but it works really well. So I think all the boards are different. Each school district is different, and each board within a school district is different, as you talk about different terms. And I feel like on any board that I serve on, we can do our best job. My belief is if we elect the leader that we feel is the best person to manage the board at that time. And it really is not as much of a vying for position. I mean, it really is just, we talked about the agendas in the matrix. That's pretty much standard. Any of us can look at it and, provide input. There are times of various crisis or challenge when the board president does get a bit more involved. But I was just talking with folks about this at our high school district, and one of their trustees formerly had a very top secret job where she had to turn in her phone every day, and like she worked in a box, and she felt like she would not be doing a good job as president because if a crisis came up, she wouldn't know about it until, she checked out for the day. And I guess eventually they were able to organize it so that she paired with a vice president that she felt very comfortable with, so that person would be the daytime point person if something came up. Hopefully nothing comes up, but oftentimes there is something. And personally, I prefer electing the leader among us, but we're all leaders and I respect everybody's leadership.
Trustee Chang?
Thank you. I agree with what you say about that when this works well, it's the norm. Like I think that I think in some ways, well, I don't want to assume for Trustee Lambert, but I'm assuming the reason it's been brought up is because with the norms, we're missing a norm. So when you say that 70% of school districts, they elect their board officers, but the norm is a rotation. That's what I hope we aspire for us to be. And I disagree respectfully when my colleagues keep saying that who's the best for the job. And having been in all these roles before, it really shouldn't be about who's best in the job, because that person's not really supposed to have any more authority than any other trustee. They're supposed to facilitate the board. And so I know that in the last time around when Bill and I were on the board, we didn't think about who was best for the job. I don't want to think the last term there was ever a question in my mind, who's the best for the job? It was whose turn it is to serve. And thank you for that person for serving. I respect that. We've heard 3 board members now say, well, they're looking for the best person in the job, but that itself conveys that that job has extra, duties that certain people can perform or not. I would aspire, it looks like most people don't support Bill's bylaw change. I would then just encourage us to go back to our previous norm, if not written, to go back to the spirit of the norm, which would be go through the, unless there's some unusual circumstances, Trustee Connolly said, let's just go back to the norm before, right? So that means that fully support that Vice President Connolly will be next president, and then next should be.
I'm being voluntold.
And then I was just saying, that the clerk should then be vice president, and then I hope that we can get back to the spirit of how we used to do things, and that, because the minute we start saying best, that's where politics really do creep in. I recognize there sometimes could be some trustees who do not have the best interest in children, and that's what censure is for. But then what if it's simply the person we disagree with their politics, right? So I think that the safest thing for us to do is at least go back to it, if not by bylaw, to the spirit, which is that's how I'm going to vote in a few months. I'm going to vote by, and I likely won't be on the board for the next rotation. So for me, I just want to see the institution back in place, the norms. So I'm fully supportive, I myself am not vying for any position because I'm likely going to finish with that one. And I want to just get us back into the norm so that when I'm watching from the outside, I can see that there's not politics on the board.
Okay, so I think we have, we're not going to bring this back for a vote. I feel like we've given direction that the majority of the board wishes to keep the policy as is, correct? Okay, thank you. So with that, we are finally on item 8, which is board updates. Board members, do you have any updates that you'd like to share? I just want to remind board members that there's a matrix with site for meet with principals for site plans. So if there's a site plan that you want to review with the principal, just make sure you fill out that matrix and pick a day that works for you before we're out of time. And there is a doodle poll out there. I know I still need to respond to my doodle poll. So there's a doodle poll out for some future study sessions. Is there a retreat on there too? I haven't even opened it, so I need to go look at it tonight.
I need to build the retreat.
Okay, that's okay.
I just want to point out, because I couldn't say this before, I'm not taking offense to nobody really wants to be every week. I know it is a hard job, and I commend all y'all for doing it, but just a little levity, that nobody really appreciates.
The weekly president.
And for the record, I've had
sometimes it's twice a week.
7 different people have been president since I've been here in 9 years. So I do appreciate each and every single person that I've interacted with. So I have no stake in the game whatsoever. But I will take it to heart. I'll make sure the president meetings are a little bit better. I'll bring cookies next time.
There's always soda and water and candy.
Yep.
So
but we do have a doodle poll for the 18th and the 20th for greening of schools. We want to review all 10. So we need we just need the board. We thought about trying to do 2x2s or something else, and it's probably a lot of information. And based off how Vargas went, we feel like you may give a lot of substantive feedback. And so we really feel like we should just give you some sustained time. And then I have to send out one more for the actual retreat. And then there's one that we need to reschedule that would have been for Sunday the 12th. I'll just have to find a day, and it'll either be tacked on to, because it'll either be tacked onto a meeting, or we'll just have to find a Saturday. So I'll work on those and get those out.
That retreat is a 2024, just to hold the date. It's up to the next president to plan that. So I just trying to get people.
Is there a Dr. Ruff, for the retreats that we've already done doodles and have agreed to, is it tentatively on the Google Calendar for us, or is it, just so that we can, yeah, is there a place where we can, the ones that are kind of tentatively scheduled that we know?
I can send you, I got that feedback today, so I can send you some holds for tentative dates, and we can definitely do that. And then I think the other thing, while we gave you all the dates in the sort of governing document, often, at least since I've been here, and I'm just going off of what I was told 8 years ago, the actual board matrix isn't really shared with everyone except for the president, but I can share it for view only. And then that way you can go in and see it in a different layout instead of, the vertical, these for this items, you see it moving all the way to the end of the year, so that you can sort of judge from there. So I'll take care of that too, but I will send holds for any potential retreat date, so at least you know it, and then we can go from there.
May I make one board update? I just wanted to say that Trustee Lambert and I went to the Teacher of the Year Awards ceremony at the Santa Clara County office a couple of weeks ago, honoring our wonderful teacher, Erica Valle Guerrero, and it was really nice.
And thank you for going to that. And I'll add that Trustee Blakely, Trustee Berman, and I went to the Santa Clara County School Boards Association's annual fall dinner, and there was a student panel on climate resilience and sustainability, which was fantastic. They did a great job.
Okay. Any public comments around board updates? Just checking. Okay.
One
Oh, yes, of course.
We're going to get the CSBA meeting is coming up.
Yes.
So we're going to get a
schedule
or whatever.
Lunches or dinner.
Yeah, so we are currently working on the lunches and dinners. So we normally do one lunch. I've talked with Nellie. That will be on Friday. So we're working to schedule that one. Then we typically have a lunch, which we're planning for that to be Thursday. And then we're working on the dinners for Friday, for the Fridays. And then in terms of the actual sessions, I try to bounce around with each trustee to hit the items that, if I see you and you're like, hey, I'm going to this and it sounds interesting, I try to tag along with those. And if anybody is planning on going to the president's one, I just need to know so that I can adjust my schedule to be there. I think it's the Wednesday before. I'll go with anybody who wants to go, and I'll sit through it. But just want to put that one out there, if there's interest in that one too.
I'll be there on Monday for the Board of Directors, on Tuesday and Wednesday for Delegate Assembly, and then for the rest of the conference.
And I know that Ellen used to do this. I didn't know if people wanted to in the past. So there was the end of one of these meetings where people just said which seminar or which workshops they're going to, so that we share the note or distributing. We don't all end in the same place, but if the board wants to.
Well, and Ellen would save seats in the front row for everybody, which, I mean, does anybody want to do that for us? Because that was amazing.
I will do that for you guys. Okay. All right, so future board meetings, they're on the agenda. I just, we put a couple of the big items that are coming up on the agenda itself. You could see some of those dates. Just a reminder that, it's not official until the agenda is published. So sometimes things move around, but these are topics that are pretty much set, I believe. So you can see those there. One of the holes is for a study session next Thursday. That's one of the holes. I want to put that on your radar. And potentially our next board meeting will start earlier to try to, to accommodate all of the work that we need to do. So if you can just put a hold on, make sure you have a hold on next Thursday.
Yeah, we just need a calendar invite for that.
Yeah, we'll put that out there. It was on my radar, so I just wanted soon. So I just wanted to tell you. But I know Dr. Rudolph will work on putting some holes on your calendar. Holes, not holes. Okay, so now let's see. At 9:57 p.m., meeting of the Mountain View Westman School District is now adjourned.